Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be giving my review slash retrospective of Battle for a New Champion. And this is kind of interesting because, yes, I'm recording this, we are a year removed from Battle for a New Champion. So a lot of the heightened feelings, the hype, all of that has kind of simmered because it's officially in the past now, not only just regarding the filming, but regarding the airing as well. And we have some time to see how the legacy of the season will hold up, not only just on its own merit, but regarding what's going to happen in the future, or what will happen in the future. But at the same time, it's still not a distant season either, as only 1 year has happened, and with the one season that took place after this being a season that obviously wasn't going to be in the benefit of a lot of people on this cast since it was based on eras, and with all of them being on era 4, only 10 people would be on that, and most of them didn't come from the season. So we really don't know what's going to carry over from this season. Though we do know that one of the major story arcs from the season, which is the whole Nerys, Olivia, and Horacio thing, doesn't really carry over because it was squashed immediately on Battle of the Eras. So that's one thing that isn't really going to carry over at all. And up until this point, this is the only season that I have never rewatched since I watched it live when it was airing, and then I didn't watch it again until now. So certain opinions regarding watching it live is obviously going to be different when you're binge watching it. And honestly, I don't think the season's the worst of the worst. When seasons that are seen as the worst of the worst, especially when they have many newer cast members, always gets that flack just because their same tired old veterans aren't on it. And I do like and respect a lot of these veterans, but once you've seen the same thing with them over and over and over and over again, some of them aren't really into it, they're not hungry for it, and there's really nowhere for the characters to go. It's interesting to see some new blood not only learn how to play the game, but to form new dynamics, friendships, rivalries, romances, and all of that. I definitely would have casted this season differently since they clearly wanted a new champion and non-winners, and they didn't cast many people from early era 4 or anyone in the prior 3 eras that never won. It's clear to me that they wanted people who debuted within the last 4 years and within late era 4, so literally from 35 onwards, to mainly be the focus of this cast, specifically with the newbies from Ride or Dies and Spice Lives and Allies, while adding some internationals. So, with that in mind, I do think the cast is pretty decent. There's honestly a lot more drama in this season than there has been in the last 3 to 4 seasons, and I do think that says a lot when it comes to the hungriness of the newer cast members, but also how still a lot of the older cast members not. At the same time, the gameplay is relatively boring and predictable, though the chaos, control, and conquest versions or stages were supposed to spice things up, but it really just calls for the large alliance to dominate throughout the entire season, and how they handled the chaos portion, especially with the champions coming in to eliminate people. And when a champion loses, no one goes home, which we saw for literally the third quarter of the season. That made things definitely a bit more stale. And you really didn't see many of the people in the cast go into eliminations against one another to form epic eliminations amongst themselves, rivalries, and to let them settle it in the sand. We really didn't get that, which is just a missed opportunity. And a lot of the eliminations in the season really weren't that good either. At the same time, I don't know if this will be a bottom 10 season because as we've worked through the entire franchise, a lot of the Era 1 seasons I do have some issues with, but the format of the season really just isn't good. It caused for a lot of people to be hidden, and they really didn't get a chance to really make names for themselves when it comes to how they performed in dailies, the moves they made, or them in elimination. So I did find that to be unfortunate. And I do think there's a distribution issue with some people getting way more confessionals than they should have, causing for the finalists to be relatively underdeveloped. But for what it is, I don't think it's really a good season, but I don't think it's the worst of the worst. And with the blinders off when it comes to it not airing at the moment, and with things starting to somewhat settle down, it could have been much worse, but it could have been much better as well. So the cast spends their first night sleeping at the elimination area where they had to find their bed and stuff socially, and we saw all of them strategizing. I didn't have access to the episode 0 where it foreshadowed a lot of the stuff that would happen in the season, but episode 1 kind of flashbacks to it a lot anyways. Jay is trying to calm down his temper, i.e. his Latino side, to make it past the halfway point for the first time in his career. Tula wants to make it to the finals this time. New parents Asaf and Melissa are playing for their children. Horacio wants to redeem himself from last season, and TJ arrives in the morning to tell them to get ready for their first challenge. Michelle is talking about navigating all of her friends this season, which is a huge theme for this season. None of the cast are champions, and this season is set up for only one of them to win. The season is divided into Control, where it is their chance to raise the prize money and to play as a group, Chaos, where they'll have to play against mercenaries, and the format will change within each daily. They don't know about the mercenary part yet, and Conquest, where they will play individually. The cast arrives to the first challenge, which is Hole Control, where they have to race to the hole to pull and stack barrels and pull one another up, where there will be a logo. And this reminds me of the first challenge of Invasions of the Champions, but I liked it more there than here. Ciaran takes the lead in the challenge, and Brenna is annoyed that no one is listening to her here. The daily really wasn't fun to watch, and was too cluttered to watch with how all of them are running behind and running around, and to see what each individual was doing. This is also the time where they made the cast wear the same outfit for all of the confessionals, though you see them wear different ones in the first episode, so it's a decision they made a bit after starting the season. That's just really annoying. It's just lazy to me, especially when you can tell throughout the season that they're wearing the same outfit, but their hair is different, and some of them have injuries, so they're clearly recording this at different times throughout the season. And I feel like this was production's way of trying to control the narrative more, where if they're wearing the same outfit, they can spice any confessional anywhere, even though that wasn't chronologically when they filmed it or what they were talking about. Everyone is eligible for elimination, and they enter the house. Brenna feels a way about Mariah kicking her out of the room, and Brenna speaks to Michelle about the bed, since she wanted to room with her. Brenna complains to Corey about it, and she's having a crying fest in her room. People are campaigning, and Tula wants to know how they are going to vote. And she talks about being aligned with the UK people, Huey, Corey, Jay, and a bunch of other people, which will definitely backfire. Tula speaks to Melissa about her plan, really, and getting a boy sent into elimination, since the boys want a girl in. The ride or die women talk about who to vote in, and Nerys is annoyed with Brenna, though Michelle feels responsible for her, and they talk about Tula and Melissa. Jay is very happy to be playing with Asaf this season, and no one knows how close they are, which is shocking since they apparently posted one another on social media, and Jay's the godson of Asaf's son, so they're really, really, really close. Though, from what I remember of episode 0, Jay outright told Nerys all of this, so she knew, and Michelle knew as well. The guys are talking about Tula and Brenna potentially being sent into elimination, and she is seemingly overhearing this. Huey and Michelle have to comfort Brenna, though she is picking a fight with Huey because she feels like he's screaming at her, where he is literally just trying to help her, and her paranoia is a complete mess. Kala and Michelle are very much vibing with one another, and he mentions that he's not committed to anyone, which is a lie! People like Jay, Michelle, and Tula know about Michelle and Callum's growing showmans already. Brenna is talking to Colleen about her predicament, and she feels like she has no connection. They also have their German connection, but as we will see, at least at the reunion, this might not be the most genuine connection. Most of the guys, i.e. Corey, Ed, Callum, and James, are talking about voting in Tula, and Tula is trying to get the ride or die woman to vote in a guy. But Olivia mentions that Jessica was already saying that Jessica wants to vote in a strong woman. And apparently, Jessica was trying to get Olivia sent in, but they never showed this, which is just dumb. We get to the deliberation where Jessica makes a really bad pitch, which the show makes it look like this was what got her nominated, but she was an easy contestant the entire time. I guess they were just hiding it from the edit up until now. Jessica is voted in by the House. Everyone, including Jessica, votes for her, but Horacio is the sole person who doesn't vote for her as he votes for Tula to go into elimination, and she chooses Tula as her opponent. They compete in Fallout, where they are in cages that are suspended in the air, where they have to get rid of the tiles in the cage, my bad, pull the rope, which will then lead to them grabbing the tire to smash the. Sorry, you have to grab the hammer to smash the cage open. Tula pretty much washes Jessica in this elimination, and it's not much of a notable one in my opinion. Jessica really didn't get much coverage in the season from the little she was there. It was clear watching episode 0 that she was on the outs with the cast, just due to being Australian, and we saw how that panned out here. as she got annoyed with Siren for speaking to Raven. She did get a brief fling with Devon right after her elimination, but there's really just nothing to say here. Tula and Melissa are glad that the former won, and Horacio realized that he screwed up with voting in Tula. Jay and Chanti are talking about how they are working together, while all of the US people are working together. It seems like the Spice License Allies and Ride or Dies people are working together, but they frame it as an American thing, and Chanti is here for his kid, who was born literally days before him flying out to do the season. And his woman, Amber, is a champion, so he feels like there's a lot of pressure on him. There's clearly some tension between the two of them, and I do remember Jay shading Chauncey on podcasts last season for being really weak. So I guess some of that carried on to here. Huey and Olivia are talking about her being a tomboy and how he's a gypsy slash traveler background. Those are the words he used, and I'm just using his words. It's not the words that I typically use myself. And it's really nice to know all this about him. Kyle and Kyland and Melissa are getting close, as Kyland talks about how he finished watching Total Madness a week before getting onto the season. The daily is ball control, where they have to get the ball with their names and put the balls in the bin above water. But they have to climb a ladder to bring the balls up, and they have to shoot the balls with their name. I didn't like this daily, and I was really stupid watching them so cluttered, and you can't even tell who's doing what. The cast is not impressed with Chanti flopping in the challenge, despite his huge build. The cast flopped in the challenge, and everyone kind of realizes that a guy needs to go home this round. I think they also failed the last challenge, if I'm remembering it correctly. Huey is one of the weaker guys for one side, and Chauncey was the guy for the other side, though the Americans are talking about how Chauncey is on their side, which Nerys mentions. But Corey is protecting Huey and wants to work on their relationship after Spice, Lies, and Eyes, and because they're two gay men, and he doesn't want them fighting again. Raven ends up overhearing this conversation, which she will definitely remember. Huey and James are having a fun enough banter, and Raven also gives Chauncey a heads up to help him to save himself, essentially. The guys are worried about this because the person nominated can choose any guy as their opponent, so they're kind of trying to manipulate Huey and Chauncey to choose whoever they want so they can all be safe while sagging banking either Huey or Chauncey. Melissa wants Kylan to kiss her, and he refuses. She feels a way about this, and he blames it on his autism, which I think is BS, since he was allegedly seeing Taylor from Big Brother 24 at the time. It's even more bullshit to blame it on his autism, since we saw him making out with Naya several times on camera on Battle of the Heirs, and in the reunion for this season, Melissa mentions that they were kissing at the hotel before the season even started. So Kylan's just a liar. And I don't like when people weaponize stuff like this over and over and over again. Anyways, Nerys is talking about how Olivia is her best friend and they talk every day, and we know that this is clear foreshadowing. And the both of them are talking about Raven trying to fight for Chauncey, so they don't really trust her either. Though it's ironic because them turning on him here will be foreshadowing as to how some of their American allies treat them later on in the season, but they didn't see it at this point. Chauncey makes his pitch to all of the American people, and he tells them that he won't choose any of them, which is dumb since they're voting him in, and they tell Chauncey that Huey might choose him if he's nominated. Huey makes his pitch, and of course Chauncey does as well, where he asks people if he did anything wrong, and a bunch of people last season mentioned that he did do them wrong. Horacio mentions that he voted him in once when he told him he wasn't going to. Michelle mentions that Chauncey and Amber backed off from them when her and Jay were getting smoked last season. Jay mentioned that Chauncey told him this season that he doesn't trust him, and Olivia sides with Horacio. Michelle, Huey, and Olivia campaign for Chauncey to go in since Huey is more a priority for them, and Raven doesn't like this at all. Raven tells this to Siren, and they all make sure that Chauncey won't choose an American, and Raven is telling Kieran literally get around to the entire house that she did this. Chauncey gets voted in, though the international people and Raven vote other people, and he chooses James, which is weird since they didn't even show him on the episode at all. But I guess it just meant that Chauncey was clearly going home here, where they compete in Might Life, where they have to fill the light into the hole, and there's a series of holes that they have to block. Since they have to get the most sequences of 3 in the wall to win the elimination. I actually do like the elimination since it's a mix of endurance and strategy, but we do see James be more strategic at first, but he loses some endurance, but it ends up being close, where Chauncey does lose, despite the cast rooting for him to beat James. Tanti completely flopped the season. He got outplayed and kinda got clowned by his own people, who threw him under the bus for really no reason. The fight really wasn't there in him, and he was kinda lost without Ember. Maybe it had to do with leaving his newborn right after he had his first child, but I don't see what else he has to offer. He might come back just due to his association with Amber, but I wouldn't really care if he didn't. James and Mariah are getting very close, and James is her type, where Bananas was not her type last season, which we saw on the episodes there. A lot of the cast is talking about Raven chatting to Sieran at the 11th hour, as Chanti was going to pick an international player. Michelle is fine with Raven being a target now due to this and not voting for Chanti in the last elimination. And the way they handled all this is just really, really, really stupid. But it showed how Jay and Michelle and some of the others would handle eliminations down the line that some of the others who are higher up at this point didn't really notice. Chula is talking about being a qualified chef, which is why she wasn't on last season, and she's cooking for the cast. Huhui is struggling with speaking to people in the cast since she speaks Spanish and isn't strong in English, which is why it's dumb to cast people who aren't strong in English. But her and Horacio are bonding over this, and this is during the time they're trying to legitimize the people who debuted on the short-lived international versions of the show. During the meal, Raven notices that the ride-or-die woman that she's writing for aren't talking to her, so she knows that she has a big target on her. Everyone is having fun, drinking, and celebrating in the hot tub, but things go very wrong. Berna thinks that Tula and Melissa are talking about her. Apparently, she just fought with Nerys at around this point over dancing with the radio by the water, where obviously that is a hazard for many different reasons. Berna confronts Melissa for bullying her, and Melissa's brother to you. She didn't say that. Since Melissa was bullied when she was younger, and she knows how that feels like. She gets denominated up. Pull Brenna down. And Brenna doesn't want Melissa to scream at her, or Melissa continue screaming at her and put her finger in her face. Brenna then gets into Melissa's face, but the cat quickly separates them, and Brenna breaks the lamp before running off. Brenna is somewhat messy, and Melissa's equally as messy, so I actually kind of enjoyed this. Emmanuel has to comfort Brenna, and Corey is over Tula and Melissa at this point. The daily is Control Tower, where they are driving in their buggies as drivers, and some of them have to work on an equation, where others have to go to the Control Tower to tell the drivers where to go, based on the solution to the equation. This is probably the best challenge in the control portion, since you notice what everyone does individually, and it is a mixture of different skills. They pass the challenge for the first time, and no one can determine who the weakest link is, so this vote will be based on politics and social game. Melissa and Brenna do make up, and we see Callum and Michelle getting closer to one another, to the point where they're kissing at the club. Huey isn't over Raven, voting for him, and we have a montage of Raven making the same pitch to several people, so she's just very messy and sloppy as hell politically. Jay tells Michelle that that he doesn't trust Callum at all, and he's leading the other side, though we never really saw this, so he needs to go. But Michelle doesn't like him questioning her. Mariah and Colleen talk about Brenna, and she just fights with too many people and is pissing a lot of people off. But it's clear, no matter what, that Raven is getting sent in. The women are talking about burning their votes, and Corey and Jay think that it's a dumb idea, though Corey is the one that is vocalizing this more. And he's telling Mariah and Zara this, where there's some tension between Zara and Corey at this point. Raven ends up being nominated, and she chooses Hui as her opponent, where they compete in Dirty Deeds, where they have to look through the mud, no, not the mud, but the mound, see, sand, to get to the objects where they can't wrestle one another outside of a ring, and they have to get 3 objects. Horacio is cheering for Hui in Spanish, and Mariah is cheering for Raven, so it's fair audience interference here. I actually do like this elimination, and despite Hui getting the first point, Raven does catch up and end up beating her. Hui really seems like a nice person, but she just doesn't do well on the show in any of the seasons that she's been on, and English isn't a language that she speaks much, so it puts her at a disadvantage when it comes to dealing with English-speaking cast members. And I feel like production should be more cognizant, or at least let them speak in their native tongue more in distressing situations like this. But it's clear that they cast her because she was cheap fodder. Nothing more, nothing less. Raven is thrilled to be back, and it seems like the other women are happy that she is back as well, where she wants to regain their trust, where things are seemingly fine with Raven and Ciaran. Karen and Melissa think that it's odd that she chose to Huhui to go in over Colleen, and he's trying to figure things out, since he has no relationships with anyone like that. Horacio speaks to Zara about how he wants to run with the best, and Zara is not over how Corey spoke to her, especially with him trying to get her sent in, despite stating otherwise. So it's clear this is where their bond started coming in, and which is why he kind of fell off from his main alliance. Asaf and Corey are talking about how they are fine with one another, and as we all know, this won't last, and people are tired of the control phase at this point. The daily is under control, where they have to swim to the buoys, where there are puzzle pieces at the bottom, and they have to bring the pieces to the color-coordinated puzzles. Huey is trying to involve himself, but it just seems like the others aren't really caring for what he has to say or think, and Nerys knows that she is a weak swimmer. This was a decent daily, and they do end up passing it. This round is a male elimination, and it is Tula's coming out party, and everyone is celebrating it for her, where some of the men are dressing in drag. They didn't state what she came up with on the show, and I always found it weird that they did this. And they did it with Polly on USA too. But in the press and all that stuff, she said that she's bisexual with a preference for women. And I did find this interesting, especially with how she reacted to Logan on Spice Lies and Allies, though she talked about later on how she really, really, really liked women and she had a strong reaction to them. So I don't know if she was overcompensating with Logan or she just genuinely liked him that much. So, anyways, Asaf talks about how much he likes Corey as they and Emmanuel are all dressing in drag, and they're emphasizing this again for a reason. They play a game to be messy, and Huey is leading the conversation, where it seems like he's just not vibing very well with the cast. Tula talks about being with a woman until recently and was shocked with how much in love she was with this woman. And of course, there was that societal pressure stuff, which is why she wasn't forthcoming with it. Zara still wants to throw Corey into elimination since he is very two-faced, and it seems like Mora and Raven are with the internationals as they are talking about this, which I found to be pretty interesting. Michelle and Callum are talking where he is telling her that she takes up all of his thoughts, and he talks in the confessional about how he has a girlfriend. Mariah and James is being discussed around the house with the likes of Olivia and Nerys talking about Mariah's situation with Bananas last year. Mariah talks to Nerys about it, and they're talking about Bananas, and I don't give a single fuck! Bananas has cheated on his girlfriend or girlfriends with so many women on the show. He and Mariah were not boyfriend and girlfriend, and she can do whatever the hell she wants. Don't expect me to talk about this for much longer. Raven speaks to Corey, and he is talking about how he is together with so many people, but Michelle enters the conversation to tell Corey that Zara is campaigning for him to go in. The Ride or Dies Alliance, which now includes the Spice Lies Allies people, Kyland, and Asaf, is talking about how Corey is also shady, but they don't want to throw in another ally like they did Raven. We get to the deliberation where it is clear that either Corey or Huey is going in, and Huey is confused as to why he is being thrown out there, where he is getting very defensive. Corey mentions that he was not a fan of the woman burning the votes last round, and he regrets what he did not landing, i.e., trying to get Zara out. So he regrets not getting her out, not the fact that he tried to get her out. After the deliberation, it is clear that a UK guy is going in, where it is either James or Huey. Callum overhears the conversation and reports it to James, who goes on a rant, which, whatever. Huey is voted into elimination, and he chooses Kylan as an opponent for How I Roll, where they have to roll a ball down the track to shoot it in a container basket, and they have to get 9 of them in. It's a solid enough elimination, but Kylan ends up beating Huey here, and the control phase of the season ends. Huey didn't last long last season and performed even more poorly and even worse this season. He was still relatively likable, but he wasn't involved much in the drama or in the dynamics, really, or was as funny as he was in Spice Lies and Eyes. While I have no problem with him coming back, I wouldn't be shocked if he never comes back, and honestly, I would kind of be fine with it too. Honestly, it is very easy to forget that Huey was even on this season. Hyland feels great about his elimination win, and they realize that chaos is about to start after 13 hours. We have more of Corey and Asaf talking, and Asaf is claiming that he is playing both sides and wants to make a bunch of big moves. Jay, Nerys, and Asaf are talking about what they would do when it gets to chaos, and they're talking about what to do if they're stuck in partners, as they need to pair with someone from the other side of the house. And it seems like James and Ciaran are the next targets in their eyes. And the next morning, there are 5 more hours left, and Ciaran wants to win now, instead of getting second like he did on Australia. And he and Zara know that they need to win for their alliance. Chaos will have them playing in all or many different types of forms, whether it's in pairs or in larger groups. The daily is Upside Down Whirlwind, where they and their partner have to grab hoops while on the side of a truck that's spinning in a circle, or at least the platform that they're on, and placing it on a pole. The pairs are randomly placed. I don't care to recap them since it's only for this challenge. The daily is fine enough since it does involve precision while being in an imprecise position. Raven and Corey end up winning the daily, and they have to decide a man to put into the elimination. They speak and they decide to send in Asaf and Michelle, since Corey and Raven couldn't agree with a lot of the names, and I think Corey is trying to play all sides, but this infuriates Asaf. We see him snapping at Corey while they're still in the parking lot that they did the daily in, because they were best friends in his eyes, though Corey mentioned that he only knew him for 2 weeks. Apparently, Asaf was the one fighting for the bitch. He calls Corey a bitch. And Corey just doesn't give a fuck, since Asaf needs to win a challenge to do anything about it. And I think this happened because they didn't know that he and Jay are right or dies, so it was kind of a flaw in the strategy here, but still shady of Corey, knowing that his alliance wanted a specific amount of people and certain people to be targeted, and he did the opposite. And this messiness is kind of why Corey ended up in the position that he was in. Raymond speaks to Zara about how Corey was working with a bunch of the internationals, so Corey is playing both sides, and Asaf was at the bottom of the inter. No, I think he was at the bottom of the US people, and a lot of the Americans are not thrilled with Corey's choice. Michelle is worried about having to do an elimination since they are partners, and she's close with Corey from Spy, Slice, and Ally, so if Asaf goes in, she, as his partner for the challenge, will have to go in. Horacio and Nerys have a crush on one another, and she's grinding on him, with Olivia throwing some shade in the confessionals, though that could have been recorded way later, but they're putting it in here. But she mentioned that if they felt like that about one another, sparks would have popped off a year ago. Michelle calls out Corey for his choice since she's also in danger, and Corey mentions that TJ specifically said a man was going in, but she's snapping at him because there's a risk that she could go in, since he was saved last round. I mean Corey. Corey is crying to Michelle since he didn't think that she would be in danger, and winning was like a curse. And that's kind of the thing with Corey. He does these messy antics and then he cries about it later. Anyways, Michelle is politicking to Emmanuel to see if he would target her, and he tells her what she wants to hear at this point. Asaf complains to Michelle, Ed, and Jay, but he wants Sierra in the elimination with him, which is a dumb choice, which Michelle also mentions, but just shows how Asaf isn't all the way there. Jay talks about how close he and Asaf are, and they see one another every single weekend, so he's really not pleased with Corey's choice. Raven and Colleen speak to Ciaran about how Asaf wants to make a big move, and he's probably that big move, so it clearly got around the house. So it seems like Ciaran wants Horacio to be in the elimination, where we see Corey and James talk, as Corey realizes that no one cares about him, and he feels very close to James. Corey doesn't like that his own alliance isn't talking to him, though he literally put himself in this position. What did he expect? Especially with what he saw happen to Raven and Chauncey earlier in the season. So we get to the deliberation where Asaf calls Corey a liar. Corey asks why he's a liar. Then they go back and forth about who is close and who is not close. Corey mentions that everyone would have chosen him, which actually isn't true, and Corey's just using this to deflect. Anyways, they continue to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, though Asaf is claiming that he's now going after him, and whatever. All that is done, and Corey hopes that he loses. People are over it at this point, and people are talking about how a partner might have to go into elimination, where Raven and Corey mentioned specifically that a guy was going in, which is what they were told. Asaf is campaigning for Ciaran to go in, and a few other people, like Mariah, vote Emmanuel, but Ciaran ends up getting nominated. Ciaran and James are talking about the UK alliance getting smaller and how he needs to win the elimination. We do get to the elimination, and it's announced that the chaos portion will have the cast face mercenaries, who are champions. Due to this, only one of the nominees will play into the elimination, which kind of sucks for Ciaran since he most likely would have been Asaf in this elimination. Probably. Can't be too sure, but whatever. Jordan is the mercenary, and he has to pull one of the three balls. Two are named after a nominee, and the other is a freebie, where they can choose any person of that specific gender, outside of the people immune from winning the daily. Ciaran is chosen, so he and Jordan play in King of the Hills, where they have to run the ramps where they have to turn off the green or orange light, and whoever has the most points after a minute, they will win that round. And they have to do 3 rounds if I'm remembering this correctly. This elimination was definitely weird since they were not allowed to do physical contact after a while, and Jordan stopped after a while to complain about his shoes, but it didn't really look that way on the episodes that he was complaining solely about his shoes. It could have been decent if it was a bit more clear, but Jordan does speak clearing here. Emmanuel turned his back against Jordan's speech, and I remember the cast tweeting a lot of weird stuff about this elimination during the airing of this episode. Anyways, Searing has a very emotional reaction to leaving. Kieran is a cool guy, and I remembered liking him during Australia and this season as well, so I wouldn't mind if he came back. At the same time, he has less impact than I remembered, with less missing moments here compared to Australia, and he really didn't add much to the season overall, so I definitely am fine with him being an earlier boot. His romance with Raven could have been more focused on, but it was less shown than I remembered. Anyways, cool guy, but more forgettable than I realized. Everyone in the house is reacting to the mercenaries twist, and they are now planning on sending the best down there to get rid of the mercenaries and so they can keep their money. Since when a mercenary beats contestants, they take some of the prize money. Everyone talks about the vets that they want to face. Horacio and Nerys are bonding and getting closer, and we have the pre-game alliance of the Fantastic Four, which consists of Asaf, Jay, Nerys, and Michelle having their first meeting, and we kind of saw this in episode 0 forming between Jay and Nerys, where they talk about Asaf being a rat, and they all agree to vote together as a unit, where Melissa and Tula are the next targets. And with this in mind, and them agreeing to vote as a unit, I'm starting to kind of see things differently when it comes to Nerys technically turning on the Alliance first, since she did vote differently from them way later down the line. But we'll get there when we get there. Michelle does apologize to Corey, and he cries to her again, since she is his number one. Melissa and Tula know that they are huge targets, so they need to win. The daily is Bingo Bango, where they are split into teams and they have to get the mud pit. Sorry, they have to go into the mud pit for their teams, and I've made it clear how much I love this daily throughout these 4 seasons, and they have to get 5 in a row to make either a diagonal line, a straight line, horizontal line, or a straight to vertical line. Olivia and Jay plan to sabotage the challenge so Melissa and Tula can lose, and things get very physical with Nerys and Melissa. So of course the two of them are going at one another during the pit. And after the pit, because Nerys pinned her down and told Bernard to get the ball while she was being sabotaged, Melissa then kicks Nerys unnecessarily after the challenge. And I don't think we've seen a mud pit this nasty. The red team of Emmanuel, Kylan, Horacio, Berna, Zara, and Colleen win the daily, with Zara specifically having a standout performance, and they have to choose a woman to send in, where it ends up being Melissa, though obviously Kylan is trying to argue against that. Nerys has to convince Horacio in Spanish to vote in Melissa, and due to all of this, it's kind of hard for me to feel bad for them, specifically Horacio and Nerys at the end, when they did stuff like this, but we'll get there. Zara is supposed to get along with them, but she's cozying up to Raven and Nerys, and Nerys feels great about Melissa getting sent in. And I do remember it being reported that Tula and Melissa didn't really like Zara due to her flipping on them, and it kind of has me not feeling that bad for Zara later on in the game as well. And obviously, Nerys feels great about all this because she was choked and kicked by Melissa in the challenge. Tula and Melissa talk about how they were sabotaged in the challenge, and they know that she is going to be the house vote, i.e. Tula will be the house vote, but Melissa wants to get Nerys sent in. They go to the club, where Horacio gives Nerys a strip dance, and Melissa does campaign to Corey about the Nerys or Raven, which he tells the Americans about. Asaf is very cocky during his conversation with Callum for some reason, thinking that he's puppeteering him, but he really isn't doing a damn thing, and Callum is trying to get his vote essentially to vote his way. We then have Nerys and Melissa arguing about what happened in the challenge. Nerys denies pushing Melissa's face into the water, and Melissa mentions that Nerys is creating an enemy, and then yelling one another about beating one another up. Nerys says that if she wanted to, she could have. Melissa says, and Nerys ends up walking away to follow her anger management advice, where she apparently got into legal trouble a bit beforehand due to fighting another woman. I remember seeing that online. Melissa tells Tula that Nerys isn't a possible nominee, so they have to go for Raven, even though Tula doesn't want Raven to be nominated. Nerys and Horacio talk some more, and Asaph throws Callum under the bus to Jay, and I don't know why the two of them are so cocky about this, but they now want Michelle's teddy boy out of the game. The ride or die women talk about where Callum is at since he's protecting Melissa, and Michelle has Callum on a need-to-know basis. Melissa speaks to James to get Raven in, and this gets back to the ride or dies woman, where Raven getting sent in really wasn't going to happen here. Despite Tula and Melissa's campaign, everyone knew that Tula was getting sent in. We get to the elimination where a cast, whom no one from the cast knows about outside of the UK people since they didn't watch the spin-offs, and she chooses Tula's ball. They play in loaded barrel where they have to roll in a barrel to get 5 bags where they then have to solve a puzzle. I didn't really care much for this elimination, but Tula does beat Kaz pretty easily here. Melissa and Tula are grateful for the results, but they know that they just need to win. Maurice and Horacio, Michelle and Callum, and James and Mariah are all getting some love happening, and Callum feels like he is good with the the US, due to Michelle and obviously his UK alliance. We have Horacio talking to Brenna, and she notices that he's not good at the social political game, and this is coming up specifically here for a very specific reason, where Corey is speaking to Melissa about how his people attacked him to make him feel bad, and his people are still not over him throwing in Aesop's name. And that's solely Corey's fault, so I don't know why he's playing the victim here. Melissa feels like she can trust Corey, but we all know that this won't end well at all. Callum speaks to Emmanuel about his UK season, and he also talks about Horacio's poor political game, where he and Emmanuel talk about winning for their families. Working the Angels is a daily where they are working in pyramids and we have to do some sort of matching on the puzzle or whatever, where they are in teams of 3. I didn't care much for this daily at all, but Mariah refusing to do the challenge due to her nose job is just very pathetic. Horacio, Canon, and Tula win the daily, and they have to choose one man, where Horacio doesn't want to make the choice, but Canon wants Emmanuel, but Horacio is thinking about either Callum or James, but it ends up being Emmanuel, though a lot of people are not thrilled with this due to the big alliance, and since Emmanuel has a lot of connections, probably due to him being from Spies, Lies, and Allies. People shade Horacio for struggling to make a choice, but we have Callum talking about how untrustworthy Nerys is, which Brenna agrees with, but saying this to Jay of all people clearly isn't good. Ed refuses to work with Tula and Melissa, and Horacio does explain himself to Emmanuel, where he's kind of blaming Kylan for it, where Horacio regrets the choice, essentially. The herd is still talking about Corey, and they're still not over the Asaph vote, and Michelle does not like that Corey's name is still in their mouths. Callum and Michelle have a date, and Corey is wondering why his name is being thrown around as he doesn't. Sorry, he's wondering whose name is being thrown around as he doesn't know anything, which has him worried since if they're not telling you which name's thrown around, you're usually the name being thrown around. It's clear that Corey is going in at this point, and he gets very defensive, so he decides to throw Melissa and Tula under the bus, pretending to be their friends and using them for information for his alliance. He's essentially saying this to get in good with his alliance again, but it really does nothing to save him this round. And he calls Tula out for not being innocent, and the two women call him out for being a piece of shit, since they had his back and the whole LGBT stuff. When their conversation also comes up here. People in the Big Alliance kind of found this odd, since Corey actually has to tell people actual information, but he doesn't, so really this does nothing for him. Anyways, Corey is sent into elimination, and we have Devin as the mercenary, where he pulls the pointy bell, which means that Devin can choose anyone he wants that didn't win immunity for that gender, and he chooses Callum. Apparently, he chose this because the woman he was hooking up with, Jessica, i.e., the one who was eliminated first, bitched to him about Callum, and knowing what we know now, Devin might have been jealous due to Callum and Michelle's showmance due to Devin liking Michelle. They play in Totally Mental, where they have to drag crate into a number to see a bunch of content within it, and then count the amount in each crate, and then organize the numbers in order. This elimination really sucks and it's just really boring as hell to watch, where Callum doesn't have a chance despite the cast helping him. So obviously, Devin beats him. I did enjoy Callum on the season, despite him blatantly cheating with Michelle, as she didn't know about it, and he has a lot of charm to him. He wasn't as chaotic as he was on X on the peak, and it does suck that he was safe without that stupid third vowel, but there's really no payoff with the cheating thing, and he didn't do anything else. I would be happy to see him come back, but I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of left him behind at this point, but I hope that's not the case. Highland, Horacio, and Tula realize that they screwed up with targeting Emmanuel and missing their shot, and Michelle is telling her allies that she's doing fine enough with Callum gone. Jay pushes for Zara to go, and they all want Melissa to go down now. Emmanuel still wants Tula out. I forgot that they had issues from Spice Lies and Allies that never really made it onto the episodes of that season. And Jay shuts it down since he doesn't see her as a threat, and Michelle is also throwing out Raven. Colleen is a therapist and is bonding with the men, but is struggling with the woman, which I do think was kind of an underrated storyline this season that they didn't really capture much of on the episodes. Tula calls Kyle and his son during their weekly phone calls that they get in the house, and her confidence is getting worse because no one wants her in the house. Melissa speaks to Corey about throwing her under the bus, and he does apologize for how he handled it. So things are seemingly fine with them, though Corey knows that he needs to play clean from now on. Sarah knows that she's on the chopping block, so she is recruiting Raven, where she already has Mariah and James. The daily is Tower of Power, where they are on the two teams and they have to build a sturdy block with a bunch of junk in the yard, and the other team has to break into it. This is a pretty forgettable daily, and they are pulling these chains where Kyle ends up getting hit with one, injuring a part of his face. The orange team wins, which includes Mariah, Zara, Raven, Nerys, Corey, Emmanuel, Jay, Berna, and James, and they have to nominate one woman to go in, and they choose Melissa, but she is shocked that Raven, Berna, and Corey voted for her. Melissa and Tula campaign for Mariah, who is not going to throw anyone under the bus for the two of them, though Tula is annoyed that he has not apologized to her. Mariah regrets saying their names instead of Colleen's, and Asaf is pushing for Jay and Brenna for Kylan to get nominated, especially since Kylan never apologized for blowing this challenge. Mariah campaigns against Colleen to Zara and Michelle, and people are noticing how selfish Mariah is. So everyone is now at the club, and we see Emmanuel and Kylan talking about working together, though this never went anywhere since Emmanuel is just lying to him. With Colleen and Raven feeling on the out of the 38th woman, and Colleen notices that Mariah is just off in general. Melissa decides to confront Brenna about her vote, and Brenna ushers Mariah to join the conversation, since essentially Brenna didn't want the smoke, or at least solely on her own, and Mariah doesn't appreciate Brenna pulling her into it, so those two are starting to argue with one another, and Mariah calls Brenna out for trying to fish for information. Well, Melissa trying to fish for information, so Melissa's clearly lying. Melissa then decides to confront Raven about her vote, and Raven apologizes about how she can't change anyone's mind, and she never made a deal with Melissa. Melissa thinks that Raven is being flaky as hell, and as they had prior conversations where Raven mentions that it's a unanimous vote, so even if her vote changed, there was nothing that was going to change. Raven really doesn't want to do this with her, but Melanza stands up over her and yells and gets into her face where Raven mentions that it's not her fault that she doesn't have the numbers, and Melissa decides to throw her drink at Raven. And it's crazy how everyone was cheering Melissa on about this online, but if someone of a different complexion did this, they'd be called all types of ghettos and other slurs. Because of that, Raven threw her drink back at Melissa, and I think it was the glass as well. And Raven yells at Melissa and he says, "Carry yourself." Melissa does her typical Karen stuff after stirring the mess and plays the victim card, where more people were actually trying to console Melissa over Raven, which definitely had Raven feeling some type of way, and I don't blame her for this at all. Tula pitches to Ed, like borrowing money, to get him to vote with her, but it goes nowhere. We get to the nomination ceremony where Raven and Melissa use this to go at it once again, where Raven mentions that she doesn't owe Melissa anything. Melissa calls her all types of fake, based on essentially nothing really, as she doesn't have any prime example, and Raven tells her to prove herself once again. Callan calls out the others for being scared, essentially, which doesn't help his case, and it feels like he's only saying this because he's not getting his way, and it's a part of Callan that I really just don't like. Tula is nominated into elimination, which is obvious to everyone, and they have a sour moment between the two friends, where they look at Melissa's daughter stuff, and they're hoping that the mercenaries will be one of their friends, who will be easy on them, and they pick the prickly brow, like what happened in the last round. Casey is the mercenary this time, and she ends up playing Tula's Barrel, where they compete in Pole in the Storm, which is just a pole wrestle. It's clear that Casey's going to win this one, though I believe she let Tula take a point, which was nice, and Casey is really just not happy with this one at all. Of course, Tula and Melissa have a very emotional hug before she leaves. They definitely made Tula the central character of the season up until this point, and it was interesting to see her as a main character and an underdog at the same time. She was a bit more likable this time, where I kind of found her annoying in her last season, and she was a bit more into the drama, but I do think she was a bit too oversaturated when it came to the screen time. She won a bit more this season, so props to her on that. It's crazy that her feud with Koi is most likely the one thing that's going to carry weight post this season. Melissa is really sad that Tula left and she is now on her own, where Raven and Colleen don't realize that they will be next after Melissa is gone. Melissa thinks that she has Kylan, James, and Asaf, where we know that things are going to go very horribly very soon. Horacio tells Kylan that people are protecting him and he doesn't get why people are doing that, so the both of them know that their time is coming to an end sooner than later. Sorry, I think Horacio's telling Kylan that people aren't protecting him anymore. And to be honest, they just do their own thing and they feel good that they're doing their own thing. Mariah is talking about her situation with Johnny and I don't give a fuck. So Mariah is being told to call him, but she wants to explain things post-filming, though Devin already knows and he called her out about it, and Olivia is losing trust with Mariah, also due to her befriending Zara. We have Asaf and Melissa talking about how they're on the outs now, and they have a parent pact on day one that they do the flashback on here, and was on episode 0, and Asaf promised that he would never say her name, but he is planning on turning on her, and he's comparing himself to Devin. Yikes. And I know Devin didn't take well to this when this episode aired. Emmanuel and Colleen are talking, and she is gaining a crush on him, but everyone is talking about Emmanuel flirting with people, which includes Olivia, Raven, and we learn a lot later on that he also hooked up with Berna. The daily is Doomsticks, where they have to play 3 rounds, or play in 3 rounds in pairs of 2, with the exception of one group of 3. For the first round, they have to target one another, where the first out will be booted, and the winners of this part gets to boot 2 pairs. Asaf, Zara, and Raven win this round, with Kylan and Michelle being out, which is a bad sign for Kylan socially, where the trio boot James and Melissa and Colleen and Ed as well. Melissa whispers to Asaf but to save her, but we know that this will go nowhere. Power Sticks has them carrying large cylinders across the trial, and of course the trio wins here yet again. Jay and Mariah are last, where the winners boot Horacio and Nerys and Corey and Olivia. So it's between them and Emmanuel and Brenna for pickup sticks, where they have to hold the pickup sticks to put in a hole and to carry the blocks, where they have to make a puzzle. The daily is fun enough, but of course the only trio wins the daily. Once they are told that a woman is getting nominated, Raven is insistent on setting Melissa in, even though Raven's on the outs herself. But hey, if I was violated like that, I guess I can't blame Raven. And Asaf is essentially the one who has to break the tie to send Melissa in, though Zara doesn't want to do it. Kylan decides to be Mr. Savior and calls Asaf out because it would be hard for his wife to throw in a mother into elimination. And though I'm pretty sure his wife really wouldn't give that much of a shit, but he is right about Asaf being shady. Though Kylan never defends any other woman on Big Brother, which I felt to be very interesting that he does it here, but I'm not going to go off track right now. Asaf thinks that Kylan is talking about his mother. Apparently, this might have been due to some language barrier, since English isn't his first language, and certain slang he's not going to pick up on. But they are pointing in their fingers. They're pointing their fingers in one another's faces. They're stepping up to one another. There are some benches thrown between them, and of course, they are separated like that by the cast. And TJ just really isn't here for it. Kylan is claiming that he has watched Asaf talk about this with Melissa several times, and Melissa, of course, throws her jab in as well, since he did turn on her. Zara knows that she was not going to get involved, and Michelle talks about how Bernard is a priority, so she is fine saying Colleen's name for the other vote, since Zara and Raven are safe, and those who would have been nominated otherwise, most likely. They go to the club, and Colleen speaks to Ed about her fate, where he tells her that it's going to be either Colleen or Brenna voted in. Melissa and Asaf have a conversation, and it's not going well at all, and it becomes confrontational, since she says that it broke her heart to make the parent pack, and it hurts her heart that he broke the parent pack, and he doesn't know what she's talking about, conveniently. They are cutting one another off in this conversation. He claims that he never promised anything to her, but she calls him flaky as hell, and he wants the facts, and she thinks that he is so stupid to deal with, and she says that he is next, which technically isn't a lie, but not for the reasons that she is stating that he is next, but we'll get there. Colleen is getting into her feelings watching Emmanuel dancing with a bunch of the women, and James is trying to pull Mariah into the ride or die women, but it's a dumb move for her, really. Colleen cries to Asaph and Brenna about Emmanuel being a player, since she's heard about him flirting with Raven and Olivia, though they all knew that Emmanuel has a girlfriend, which Brenna points out to her, which is ironic based on what is revealed between Brenna and Emmanuel at the reunion. Colleen has a conversation with Emmanuel and she wants out of it. Olivia is complaining about Mariah to the herd, and Michelle is essentially shutting it down, despite Mariah protecting James and Zara, because Michelle sees Mariah as her number one woman. Colleen campaigns against Mariah, my bad, and also mentions that Michelle, Nerys, and Olivia are running the house that needs to be stopped. And it's very clear that Colleen and Mariah just didn't like one another throughout the entire season. Tori pulls Melissa's name. Tori's the mercenary this time. And they end up playing Going Under, where they have to go underwater to memorize puzzle pieces and then solve the puzzle. Not my favorite elimination, though I don't like underwater eliminations like this anyways. And Tori calls out to Mariah for breaking Bananas' heart. I don't give a fuck! Causing Mariah to be very emotional. Both Tori and Bananas have flaky histories themselves, so how dare they call Mariah out? Anyways, Tori wins over Melissa. Melissa is ratchet and ghetto as hell. She was hooking up with Kylan while she had a boyfriend at home. She's throwing drinks at Raven and getting into Brenna's face, and then there's her brutal betrayal that she got from Asaph, where you can tell that this dislike between them is real. Though at the same time, they weren't really number ones, and it didn't seem like she prioritized that as much. Though he was trifling at her, and he should have just owned turning on her. I do think Melissa brought out a lot of drama to the season and gave back that messy vibe of the show that has been missing in the last few seasons, and it made the season more interesting. Despite that, I really do not like her victim mentality after starting stuff, which she had even on Vendettas. With the obvious targets gone now, i.e., the internationals for the most part, Colleen realizes that she needs to improve her game and to get out Mariah, where Colleen is definitely now. Melissa wrote Kylan a letter after being booted, and Michelle tells Mariah that James being in the house is not good for her emotionally and strategically, where Mariah sees the James thing and the Johnny thing as two separate things, and Michelle tells her that she has one more month left. Asaph is ranting about taking Kylan out, since it's personal now between the two of them, and Jay is definitely fine with it, where Brenna also knows that she's at the bottom of the alliance with Colleen. Brenna speaks to Michelle about how she is over it and she wants real alliances, since she does not want Michelle to see her as just a number. Michelle is trying her best to reassure Brenna, and Brenna is getting very argumentative about this. We learned that Ed did Taekwondo and he's camouflaging in the game, so I guess it's nice for it to finally get some semblance of screen time. The daily is Skyball, where they are inside a ball, and some others will race to a puzzle where they will grab the balls to place them in a pyramid. It's fine enough, but it's a daily where you cannot really tell how the individuals are performing, which is an issue with some of the next few challenges, and even some of the prior challenges. The orange team, which consists of Emmanuel, Jay, Zara, Asaph, Horacio, Mariah, Raven, and Colleen, win the daily, and they have to nominate a guy, where Kylan is the nominee. Horacio is disappointed that Jay is silent when Ken's name is being thrown out there, despite them being one another's number ones. Though his showman, i.e. Nerys, knew that this wasn't the case due to the pregame alliance. Jay knew that he essentially blew his cover, and it's pretty clear that Corey and Ed are going to be safe over James. Kylan speaks to Zara about the vote, but she mentions that Horacio was the only one who was defending him. Corey speaks to Jay about the easy house vote, and he's trying to save his hide, though Corey really had nothing to worry about here. Ed and Corey are in the same alliance, but who the other woman, like Mari, will vote for is an issue, so it just comes down to preference. Kylan and Horacio speak about how it's 7-1, and they talk about how Jay was the one who was silent, where Kylan realizes that Michelle and Jay are not here for him. He shouldn't be shocked by this because, one, he was aligned with people who were opposing that alliance, and two, they knew others longer, so I don't know why this is surprising. James notes that he's going to be the house vote, where there's another discussion about Mariah protecting James and Zara, but she makes a deal with Nerys to protect Horacio if she protects James. Brenna calls out Michelle in the club about her having so many allies, and Michelle mentions that she's protecting the hell out of her. Brenna rants about how the entire house has been after her since day one, and this argument is just really tense, since Brenna is not even in danger, before walking off saying like everyone. Though I think Brenna's really starting to see Michelle's game for what it is, and she realizes that Michelle doesn't have her as the highest priority, even though Michelle is somewhat protecting Brenna. Michelle then complains about Brenna to Olivia, and she's just too taxing and draining to deal with. Mariah is campaigning and giving James pointers to campaign, and she's annoyed that he isn't even fighting for himself. And I'm more annoyed too, because it means that he doesn't even care about this as much as she does. Ed throws Corey under the bus to Michelle, but she isn't here for this, since Corey has played a better social/political game than Ed has so far, where he doesn't have those conversations. And I think it says a lot about Ed and how he's kind of just lackadaisical in comparison to Corey, who's a lot more messy, but he's a lot more involved, and he went out of his way to improve his position. So I don't know why Ed is campaigning for Corey to go in over James. That relationship between the two of them really wasn't discussed, and it's weird because they're both spice licensed allies people. Callan and Horacio speak to Jay, where he tells Callan that he isolated himself with Melissa, and Nerys is speaking to people, and he had no choice but to vote for Callan. Olivia and Michelle are annoyed with Mariah campaigning for James, but she doesn't feel like it's fair that she should give up her number one, as James has worked with the Alliance despite being a UK person. Callan is at Melissa's funeral at the nomination ceremony, which some might think is an ode to Dan's funeral in Big Brother 14, and James is voted into the nomination. Mariah is annoyed since she's Michelle's number one woman and her opinion was not respected. I don't give a fuck. Doral is the mercenary this round, and he pulls Callan's bow, which has to do with them playing in Fire Walker, where they are on a balance beam and they have to light each arm that has a fireball, and the first person to light up all 6 of them will win. I actually do like this elimination since it's based on balance and it's a simple one, but Callan wins his first elimination against Doral. TG tells them that they're doing a daily right after this, so it's in the middle of the night. And this is the first episode of 4 where no one goes home, where things get so draining because literally this cast of 18 is the same for literally a quarter of the season. Everyone is going right to the night challenge titled Banquet of the Champions, where they are in 4 teams of 4. Get used to that, where they have to eat all of their gross food, but they need to answer a question to open the box that has their eating food in it. I actually found this to be a solid daily, where Colleen, Mariah, James, and Corey win the daily. Corey is fine to take a shot at Horacio since they barely talk despite being in an alliance. A woman is nominated where Corey refuses to say Berna and Mariah doesn't want to say Raven, but it ends up with Raven getting sent in. Raven is annoyed that Zara wasn't nominated and calls out Colleen for not defending her, and Mariah should have had more of a voice, where the others are kind of picking at her for being mad. Raven calls out Corey for every one wanting him out, and he does some sort of weird dance taunting her about him not being sent in and her being sent in. It's just very weird. Raven mentions that Corey and Colleen are flip-flops and rants about how Mariah and James should have voted for Brenna. Apparently, Corey, Brenna, and Colleen formed an alliance around this time. Zara complains about Raven calling her out to James, and we have more of Horacio and Nerys hanging out before Horacio speaks to Kenan about how he is not sending in Zara because he likes her as a competitor and he likes keeping the competitors in. They talk about Michelle playing all sides and not protecting them. Jay, Asaf, and Emmanuel kind of complain about Brenna, though they don't want to send her in, so they're fine with sending Zara out of the game at this point. There is a party where the cast are barely wearing any clothes, where Horacio and Nerys kiss. Zara asks Michelle and Olivia if they are voting her in, and they are talking around it, so that clearly gives her an answer. And she's wondering about this because she has won the most challenges in the season, and she kind of uses that in her pitch. Michelle does not want to see Laura as a missionary, but she has the feeling that it's going to happen. So she really just doesn't want it. Emmanuel is coaching Brenna to not talk too much, and Raven slash Zara speak about her outburst, where they do decide to align. Michelle rants to the others about Laurel, knowing that she's going to show up. Horacio talks about filming another show from September to April, so they won't be able to hang out for a while after the season, and Reese has a meltdown over it, since she's unlucky in love. Brenna comes into the room and she kicks Nerys out because she does not want them hooking up in her room, which is so funny to me. Brenna then calls out Emmanuel for having a girlfriend, so she removes him from Raven, which is very ironic since what has been exposed about Brenna and Emmanuel. So Raven and Nerys are over her at this point. Mariah calls out Olivia that she and Nerys have been protecting Horacio the entire season, where he doesn't really speak to anyone, and Olivia is annoyed that he's not speaking to her at all, where they're supposed to be, or when they're, sorry, while they are supposed to be ride or dies, but he's really a liability. Sarah nominates herself, though people call her out because she knew that she is going to be nominated anyways. Laurel does show up, and she picks Raven's bell, to her chagrin, since they are friends, and she can't pick Purple Shirt Michelle, who still wants to be Laurel's friend, where they playing Che Reaction, where they pull a chain through a pyramid and then have to march the pegs in order of the ropes that are colored in. And the first one to do it wins, where Raven does win this one over Laurel. Zara and Raven are happy that she is still in, though Raven won't forget that James and Mariah essentially voted her in. Michelle is still ranting about Laurel hating her, and she should be fine with her enemies leaving or losing them, or she's fine with them either leaving or losing the mercenaries already at this point in the season. Olivia feels insecure because she feels like she has disappointed based on her performance last season. Kylan and Nerys are talking about how they want to work with people who are friends and allies, and Kylan feels that Olivia, Michelle, and Jay has been distant. And Nerys tells Kylan that she might have to do her own thing, though she's floating between both sides, which is Kylan and Horacio, and the pre-game alliance with Jay, Asaf, and Michelle. So even just from this point, Nerys was definitely being very selfish. Nerys gets a call from her mother and brother where they tell her about Olivia calling Nerys broke and using her for the game. And apparently, Anissa's messy ass was seeing Nerys' brother at the time and told him all of this. So we then have Olivia complaining about Horacio to Michelle and Nerys since he did not tell her that he was during the season, and she feels like he doesn't need her anymore, where he is a taker and a selfish, where Nerys wants her to speak to him. Olivia tells Nerys to use her brain about the situation, so that's kind of a dig there, and there's definitely some tension there. The daily is We All Fall Down, where they are on a 30-foot wall high up in the water, and they're in teams of four yet again. But they have to push one another off. Michelle and Kylan kind of argue right before the challenge where they have the team confessional, where Mariah tells Michelle that Kylan thinks that she's going to sabotage the team until the challenge, and she doesn't appreciate that accusation. Ed, Horacio, Zara, and Brenna win the daily, and they have to nominate a woman to send into the arena, where they decide to nominate Colleen. To Brenna's chagrin, where she throws Ed under the bus here. Raven is grateful for Zara having her back, but she will be the house vote, which she knows about. Emmanuel, Asaph, and Colleen are confused about why Raven wasn't chosen here. Colleen has a diagram of the house dynamics where Olivia, Michelle, Louise, and Jay are playing all sides, so she wants to flip, but Asaph is a rat. Asaph reports all this to his alliance, telling this to Michelle and Jay, which pisses off the two of them, though Asaph thinks that Norris might betray them, so Jay thinks that Norris won't turn on them. So I found that comment to be pretty interesting. So I'm wondering if Jay kind of got it in his head through this conversation. But we know that won't take effect until much later on. Ed told Michelle after the challenge that Horacio is going after them, where he is offended that he is working with. Sorry. She's offended that he's working with the people that he met 3 days ago. So they're all kind of just over Horacio. And they want to get rid of that other aunt. Horacio talks to Zara about how he doesn't want the game division to ruin his friendship with Olivia. Colleen makes her pitch to Jay where he is somewhat taking a hands-off approach, where she wants Mariah sent in, though Corey mentions that Raven is strong and the women feel more connected to Mariah. It's kind of funny how much Mariah and Colleen do not like one another throughout the season, though it's never like a storyline or anything. Mariah rants about Colleen and how she wants to protect Raven, who is her number 2 woman, but Michelle has no one else to nominate. Raven tells Zara that she knows that she's getting voted in, and Olivia and Jay talk about how Nerys is very loyal to Kylan. And they don't want to run a final with him, though Jay talks about how Horacio would have been sent home earlier because Olivia was carrying him socially, so he didn't carry her to the final. Where apparently a lot of people were stating that, not only just within the fan base, but the alumni as well. Kylan and Horacio are talking about how I think Jay is turning on them, though Nerys really says nothing, and Kylan is trying to pull her into their alliance. Asaph sees this conversation and reports it to Jay and Michelle, where they realize that they're in the stable 7. I don't know who the other 3 includes outside of the 4 that's been discussed at nauseam. Raven is voted in and she is over it. Corey does some damage control with Raven about how people with good social games came in with their friends. And it's really being them coming in with their friends instead of having a good social game. And she rants about people needing to take risks while having a good social game, though Corey admits that he is playing a puss/scared game. Cara Maria comes in as a mercenary and she calls out Orange Shirt to Michelle, and she easily picks the pointy bow so she can choose anyone. Michelle is chosen because she's tired of seeing the same people nominated over and over again, and I'm referring to Cara Maria. And they compete in a blockhead, where they have to roll and lift a bunch of boxes onto their platform, but there's a label/logo on the boxes that needs to match. The audience overall is helping Michelle out, but even without that, Michelle was out puzzling Cara Maria, who was out doing it physically. So Michelle does beat Cara Maria, and the crowd literally carries her after her elimination win. Everyone is happy that Michelle won, and Jay is insistent on targeting Calland and Horacio, which will piss Nerys off, but he won't sabotage her game, which as we all know, won't last. Colleen and Raven talk about how they will be voted in again and again, so they need to shake shit up, so they need to work with Kyland, Horacio, Nerys, and Zara. The Raven realizes that Colleen is playing all sides, and it's hard for her to completely trust in Colleen. Olivia speaks to Brenna about how Horacio was in everyone's top 3 entering the season, but he's at the bottom because he doesn't speak to anyone. And Brenna tells Olivia that Jay has her back more than Horacio, and due to this, it's kind of hard for me to feel bad for Horacio and the position that he found himself in this season. Nerys and Horacio talk about how people don't have his back because he's about performance instead of speaking, so she's trying to give him good advice, though he does not see a point in it. Karen is struggling with being on the out and not thriving in most social situations. The daily is getting tanked where they're in teams of 4 for the 3rd time, where they have to get letters in the tank and give it to the people up top to spell challenge champion. It's a fun enough daily, but we do have Michelle and Asaf throwing the daily once they are paired with Horacio, with Michelle and Asaf confirming it, with Jay also mentioning that Colleen might have thrown it too, but we have no commentary from Colleen about this. So clearly the 3 in Michelle, Asaf, and Jay planned this. Team Olivia and Corey and Brenna win the daily and they nominate Horacio, though Olivia really has no voice in the situation, but she didn't fight that hard for him to be protected anyways, since Corey and Ed watched the final threats out of the house. Kylan calls out Corey for being scared, and Corey mentions that he's not making a scared move, but he is providing himself and protecting himself. Though Corey literally said, I think last episode or the episode beforehand, that he's playing a scared game. So Kylan's not wrong, but this is the best move for Corey specifically. So yeah, it's kind of just Kylan also just stating that a move that doesn't go into his benefit is a bad move overall. Nerys is pissed off that Horacio is nominated, and they know that Karen will be voted in. Jay is bored, so he wants to make some big moves, and Michelle is not making them quickly enough for him. But Nerys will deal. Colleen speaks to Jay about how she wants to work with him, and he tells her to vote with him, and she will be protected. Though she mentions that if Raven is safe, she'll still be voted in. Nerys is talking about how she feels used, so she's questioning her alliance. What does she expect? But she does feel justified in her feelings as well. Jay tells Olivia that she does not trust Horacio. He doesn't trust Horacio as well, and she's the reason why Horacio was carried far on both seasons. And honestly, this kind of aged well based on what happened on 40. Nerys enters the conversation and she sees that Jay and Olivia are against Horacio, where she mentions that he has protected all of them, and she's arguing with Jay because they do not like how one another is speaking to each other, despite them being friends for 5 years. Since their ex on their beach season, really. Jay doesn't see why neither one of them get why he wants Horacio out, and he comes in so they do not have to defend him. Horacio comes in, and he just kind of speaks to Olivia, telling her that she doesn't have to doubt him, and she shouldn't doubt him. Kylan is trying to recruit Colleen, especially after her conversation with Jay, and Kylan wants the alliance to be him, Colleen, Nerys, Raven, Horacio, James, and Zara. So they need to split up Jay and Michelle. This is also done because Mariah is not included in this, and James is obviously going to do. James is not going to be loyal to Mariah. So Zara and Colleen are approaching James about how this never really was going to work, essentially. James tells Mariah, who tells her alliance, where she is using this to get them to protect James, and it pretty much shuts this plan down. Jay and Kylan have an argument where he is excited and confronts Kylan in an aggressive way about trying to get him sent in, which Kylan, of course, and rightfully doesn't appreciate. Raven mentions to Jay that after her being sent in for the third time, it's clear that he does not appreciate her at all, so they're playing the game, and she doesn't owe him shit, essentially, and she's right. Corey, Brenna, and Colleen decide to stay with the large alliance until chaos ends, where he tells Colleen that she is above Raven and Zara in the pecking order, so this will give her some time for them to make a move. Nerys speaks to Jay about not feeling validated, and she does not see why James is higher than her two guys, i.e. Khaled and Oscio. And honestly, Nerys really does have a good point about this, since James really wasn't in the alliance, he's an international who doesn't know anyone, and he only has ties to Mariah. So honestly, I get why she's upset. Jay mentions that he's protecting her, but she doesn't feel it, and he says that Khaled and Horacio do not have a voice when they have power. Khaled is obviously nominated, despite Jay getting some votes here, with Nerys burning votes screwing up the plan to get Jay sent in, and James and Colleen back out of it, mainly due to Nerys' vote. Brad arrives in the game and was allegedly supposed to be Bananas, but due to the Mariah thing, allegedly he backed out of the season. Though Bananas still denies that he was contacted for the season, which just sounds ridiculous and he was never contacted for it. And Brad pulls Kylan's bow, where they compete in what's going down, where they have to slide the planks, drop down to the floor to get balls, climb up with the ball, and then put it in a pole. And this is pretty similar to an elimination from last season. It's a fine enough elimination where Kylan does win over Brad. Kylan is proud to be another vet. Colleen is really playing both sides at this point, and James knows that Mariah is the only one protecting him. Asaph is talking about how he'll put himself into a lot of trouble in life or in scenarios like this, and Jay sees that he is like that as well, but Michelle controls him, and Asaph thinks that he is a puppet master, but they are very secure in their spots in the game, where things will of course fall apart, hence them showing it here. Nerys rants about how Kylan was always going to be the house vote, and the gaslighting is not something that she appreciates. Emmanuel, Mariah, Jay, and Michelle are annoyed that neither Kylan or Horacio went home, where they failed to take a shot at them, and Emmanuel is intentionally being low-key here, though they can see Colleen and Nerys will probably flip at this point. We have more of Nerys and Horacio flirting, and she's trying to be loyal, though Olivia knows that she's teetering more towards the Kylan, Horacio, and Nerys side because of Horacio's poor social game and her association with him. The daily is off in the distance, which is a mini final of teams of four, which is the fourth time that they do this consecutively, where they have to complete stations where there are bags that they have to get, and then they have to solve their own puzzle, and yada yada yada. The first part involves them sawing their own bag from their stick against some sort of sharp object, which will be repeated in the final. They then have to untie their bags from a tree, and then they have to solve a puzzle where there are a bunch of squares and puzzles in it. Colleen's endurance is completely shocking to people since she performed so poorly, and people really aren't threatened by her anymore. After that, they have to unlock a code and then organize the cylinders in a triangular pole. Kylan, Mariah, Michelle, and James win the daily, where one man is going into elimination, where someone from the main alliance has to go into elimination now. Horacio is voted into elimination, though Kylan does try hard to keep him safe. Nerys rants because Horacio was always going to be the one going in, and him doing it again, though she was more than fine doing this to Tula and Melissa a few weeks ago, so it's just ridiculous that she only cares now because she's sleeping with or kissing the guy or the person that's happening to. but not the actual fact of setting someone down over and over and over and over again. And James kind of argues with Nerissa about it, where she thinks that they're just coming up with excuses. Karen and Horacio realize that this might actually be a good thing, since one of the men in the main alliance, which consists of Ed, Jay, Corey, Asaf, and Emmanuel, need to get voted in because Kyland is safe. But there's an assumption that because Corey, Asaf, and Jay are so well connected, they are safe from the vote. So either Emmanuel or Ed is going in, since they are in the lower ring of that alliance. Olivia is speaking to Michelle about what she should do, where Michelle is loyal to her and states that she is loyal to him. Sorry. Michelle is advising Olivia to not go against the alliance. Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead there. Asaf is speaking to Nerys about how he is still loyal to her, and she states that she is loyal to him, Jay, Horacio, and Kellen. So at least she's consistent with mentioning the four of them. She's not acting like she isn't as loyal. So essentially here, Nerys wants her cake and eating it too, but she's taking the Horacio being targeting thing very personally. Michelle tries speaking to Horacio and he refuses to engage in it, where he sees that Jay and Michelle are hated by the alumni because of their gameplay. Ed speaks to Asaf about how he realizes that no one is looking at him, so he knows that either him or Emmanuel is going in, though Ed doesn't realize why Asaf and Corey are not options, where Corey was messy earlier on in the season, but like it was mentioned a bit ago, Asaf and Corey were a lot more connected than Ed was, and that's kind of Ed's fault. Mariah and Michelle do not trust Olivia because she's playing both sides, and Michelle is getting very emotional due to Jay drawing a line with the two guys, Nerys and Olivia. Emmanuel is Jay's strongest guy, ally, by like physical and as a competitor, as he's smart and fit, so Kylan's side wants to vote him in, where Jay's side wants to vote in Ed. Honestly, they should have sent in Emmanuel, based on Emmanuel just being the better player over Ed overall and being a bigger final threat, and Emmanuel eventually won the season. But Jay obviously sees Asaf as his number one and Emmanuel as his number two. And Corey is also very close to Michelle, so he felt like he had no option but to vote in Ed. We get to the vote where it's a split vote between Ed and Emmanuel, where Ed burns his vote twice to protect him and Emmanuel. So it could be a deadlock vote, and it will be left up to production to decide. Cannon tries to make the person voted in as expendable, though Michelle disagrees with all of that. Jay takes it really personally that Olivia and Reese did not vote his way, despite not voting for him or Asaf, which is really all that should matter, but Jay's just getting very entitled here. And because he's lashing out so much at Olivia and Reese about their votes, why doesn't he take accountability for how he and Asaf voted, especially with what will happen later on in the episode? So Michelle speaks to Nerys and Olivia about how they put Jay in jeopardy. So Nerys and Michelle are arguing about how she put him in a position of being sent into elimination, and Jay agrees with Michelle's sentiments. Olivia tells him to chill, and she's rightfully calls out how the guys could have switched their votes, and they should have, since they are the ones who were actually on the line in the elimination, where the girls were safe no matter what, because this is a guys' elimination, so the guys had more to lose. So we get to the elimination, and because there are not two nominees, the champion CT gets to automatically choose the other nominee. I don't know how I feel about this, where honestly, it's kind of BS, but at the same time, it's kind of their fault for not choosing a second nominee. And CT chooses Asaf because he doesn't know him like that compared to all the others, where the others he spent more time with on other seasons or Spice Lies and Allies. And Jay is really pissed off, despite CT respecting Jay enough to not choose him again. Nerys is trying to like hug and console Jay, and he walks away from her, and he's more pissed off than Asaf is, as though Asaf is the one who's literally going into elimination and could and will go home. So I found that to be weird. So they play in Mind Grind, where they have to push a wheel put it upright and then do a math equation that has some missing numbers, and they have to do this like 6 times. This elimination is boring as hell, and despite most of the house trying to help him, Asaf isn't good at math, so CT easily wins here. Most of the house is crying their eyes out, hugging, and acting so emotional about Asaf going home. Even people who weren't even aligned with him, like a Raven and Azara, where he actually takes his loss pretty well. Though Karen is happy that Asaf's gone, and Horacio isn't mad about it, and I don't blame them, especially Karen, because they got into it. Okay, so Asaf was annoying as hell, and he was trying way too hard to be funny, but you can at least tell that he was trying to at least create a show and be somewhat entertaining, though it didn't come off well. He was very cocky and arrogant, which did not come off well at all, but I do appreciate him being messy as hell, getting into fights with people, and at least embracing causing some sort of mess, unlike Jay, who always just trying to deny it. He actually seemed well liked in the game, but he couldn't compete well when he was in an elimination. It wouldn't shock me if he came back, but it also wouldn't shock me if he didn't come back. But we'll have to wait and see within the next 2 years to see what his fate ends up being. Jay is fuming that his brother is gone and he wants some smoke, stating in a confession that he's ready to get physical. No, he ain't. He's not going to get physical, especially when it's so late in the game and he could easily get his ass kicked. No. But I get his anger. Jay calls Kellen out for making fun of and laughing at Asaf in the elimination, where Asaf is disappointed in disappointing his family, and he tells Kellen to shut up. So Kellen and Asaf argued and could have gotten physical in the season, so he would be well in his right to do that, though we weren't shown Kellen laughing at that. Kellen mentions that he wasn't laughing at all, and Kellen tells Jay to cry about it, essentially. Notice how Kellen doesn't have the same energy here, though, but he does tell the others that Jay needs to calm down as Kellen walks away. Michelle is annoyed with Jay's temper tantrums since it is reflecting on her. They see the timer, so chaos is about to end within a day, with Conquest starting. Michelle tells Jay that they're going to scrap now, where they've been safe the entire season, where they essentially lost Olivia and Nerys to Raven, Horacio, and England. We see Jay speaking to Nerys with Michelle there, where she said that it was not her intentional. It wasn't intentional for that Asaf at home, and it wasn't in her intention. Where he mentions that both of them could have flipped their votes to avoid this, and they're playing their own game. But the same could be said for Jay and Asaf as well. Michelle is over his attitude, and he starts snapping at her as well. But she mentions that Jay has friends in this game because of her, as he didn't keep her safe in the season, where he stated that he kept her safe throughout the season. So he kind of has a warped perception of things here. Zara and Raven knows that they need to win since they are the strongest woman, but they're still at the bottom of the totem pole. But she doesn't really give a fuck, since those same women sent her, Raven, and over Berna and Colleen. And she talks about her father's cancer battle, and the fact that this came up now in edit clearly meant that Raven was going home. They are officially in the conquest portion of the season where it's just individual challenges. The daily, it's actually in the night, so a nighty is Dark Tide, where they are tied to a speedboat where they will then be flung off into the ocean, have to swim to a boat, and then pick their designated rings and to throw it on a pole. The last place person in the conquest portion is purged from the game. So whomever gets last here will be purged. Ed wins the daily barely over Horacio, and Raven gets dead last over Mariah, so she's purged from the game. I knew had Raven sorry. I knew Raven had potential in the show as a competitor and a personality last season, and she definitely lived up to it this season. She did get herself into a sticky situation earlier on in the season, and despite proving herself to the woman, she's thrown under the bus over and over again, where she did win a lot of eliminations and dailies. I did appreciate her drama with Melissa, Corey, and some of the others, and I hope she comes back, though I know she wants to be an actress and that might stop her. In the conquest portion of the season, the winner of the daily has to start a chain of safety, where they save someone, who saves someone else, who saves someone else, where the bottom 3 people will not be safe and they are going into exile. Essentially, the big alliance gets to control this, so there's no shock or surprise. Nerys is shocked that Jay and Michelle are acting like she isn't a good friend, instead of being mad about the vote and the game move that she made, but Olivia is being there for her, and they don't want to be pawns in other people's games. The other side is using them voting for Ed to stay as to why he should join the side, but it's really due to them wanting Emmanuel out instead of protecting him, and which Ed realizes, and he would be in the bottom of this new alliance anyways. The big alliance organizes it where Kylan, Zara, and Aracia are going to be sent in, but they want Nerys and Olivia to be the last to scare them, and they especially want Nerys to be second to last, so she has to pick between Olivia and Aracia. And it seems like they're just doing this to be petty, especially Jay. Ed chooses Emmanuel, who chooses Brenna, then Colleen, then Corey, then Michelle, then Jane, then Mariah, then Jane. And he saves Nerys instead of Zara, who he did the Challenge UK with and was aligned with all season. And she saves Olivia. Horacio essentially tells her to do this. So the plan is action. Nerys is mad that Jay put her into this position and he doesn't really care because he did that vote because Emmanuel may be coming after Horacio was Olivia and Nerys' rationale for voting for him in the last round, which they didn't show in the episode. So he doesn't care that Nerys and Olivia are in this position now. Zara is rightfully pissed off at James, and honestly, it doesn't even make sense for his game to get rid of her since she still would have protected him, where she will X him for her journal and block him on Instagram. The exile involves them running to 3 different stations and bring the flag back after completing a portion or whatever, where or a statement, my bad, where Khaled and Arasia pretty much help one another to beat Zara, where she is eliminated. I don't have much to say about Zara. She did very well in the challenges, and I think she won the most out of the women this season, and she mainly focused on that rather than the social or political element of the season. But she didn't really have a big personality until her final episode. I wouldn't feel anyway if she does come back, but with them moving away from the international spin-off people, I don't know if her chances of coming back are particularly high. Horacio and Kylan decide to keep the information about the exiles to themselves, so they make it seem like only Kylan is coming back initially. So when he arrives, Olivia ends up crying about Horacio going home and giving up his spot for her, but of course that all ends when Horacio comes back. Jay, Corey, and Emmanuel are now they're not thrilled with the results, and Berna says that the women are happy for him, i.e. Horacio to come back, and Kylan mentions that if she didn't want them to be sad, she should have voted that way so that it doesn't make them sad. Kylan is just so smug as hell, and despite all of his good attributes, it makes it really hard to like him. He talks about how everyone in the house is annoyed with Brenna, and he has no more patience for her. So she says something is wrong with his brain, and he is heartless, where he mentions that she is not logical, and there are some be quiet and shut up between the two of them, where he mentions that everyone knows that she is not kind, but they end up being separated. Brenna talks to Emmanuel about her sick mother, and they have a bad relationship. This leads to Emmanuel talking about his own mother, and it's a clear sign of his runner's edit, in my opinion. Though they're adding it here because they didn't develop him much throughout the season. We move on to the daily end of the line where we have to zip line the fastest without going past the line or falling into the water. So whomever gets last place here ends up getting purged. I remember them doing this daily all the way back on the Battle of the Seasons, which was 20 years ago, I believe, and I liked it better there than here. And it's easy to get finger/hand injuries here, which we see with James. So Jay wins the daily over Aracia by a few seconds, and Ed ends up getting purged over James and Corey, as the latter two both, as all of them DQ'd actually. I guess Ed was the slowest, so he was purged here. Yet again, I do not see why so many of the fans are obsessed with him. He really did not get much focus during the season, and he was a low tier member of his alliance. Props to him for improving as a competitor, but I still don't feel like he offers anything to the show, but at least he himself isn't irritating. I wouldn't care if he comes back, but I also wouldn't care if he never comes back. Nothing to say about him, otherwise. Obviously, with the chain of safety, Horacio and Callan are going in yet again, but the third choice between Olivia and Nerys is the real question here. Jay sees Emmanuel as his number one man now, but he sees Michelle as the more important person to save. Okay. So, Jay and Michelle are talking about the lineup to Olivia and Reese, where they're still trying to push a final with them, Horacio, and Kylan. And Olivia and Reese are the ones pushing this. Though I don't know why they are doing this when Jay and Michelle have made it clear that they are not interested in that. Mariah speaks to Reese about how Colleen is the plan to be the third nominee, essentially. And this ends up with the plan to have Mariah and James safe, where Maurice doesn't appreciate how Colleen is being saved, which will end up changing their plan. But Michelle sees Colleen as the most expendable member to her game at this point, so she wouldn't mind Colleen going in. Jay and Michelle have a conversation about how he pressed Olivia, yeah, instead of Maurice or Colleen, but he really doesn't care about who's the third person, as long as Horacio and Cannon are in, and Michelle doesn't get why Bernard is so mad at this point. Jay is also confused because Olivia greenlit them targeting Horacio a bit ago, but now she's pissed off when he's getting targeted yet again, and he's just ranting to Michelle now. Hurry, Bernard and Colleen realize that Maurice cannot be saved too early. Since she will save Horacio, then Cannon will be safe, where the three of them will be put in jeopardy, if not outright in the bottom. Mariah speaks to Michelle and Jay about the list, and she mentions that James should not be at the bottom, where Michelle feels good about sending him in, since they just met him 5 weeks ago. Maurice goes on a rant about how she would rather go home over Horacio and Kenneth, as they are the ones fighting, but Michelle and Olivia do not want her to quit, essentially. Norris is pissed off about Mariah being placed above herself and Olivia, and James being placed above all of them, and I don't blame her for this at all. We get to the chain of safety ceremony where he saves Michelle. James saves Michelle, he saves Olivia, then Mariah, which shocks people. But Michelle got to Olivia last minute about the plan, as she would have been in the bottom three if she didn't vote with them to save Mariah. Then James, Emmanuel, Brenna, Colleen, and Corey is saved. Jay is mad at the chain order since he wanted to be saved, but no one trusts Olivia, and he essentially snaps at Colleen being saved here. Brenna defends Corey being saved, and Maurice tells Brenna to shut the fuck up, or she'll pop her in the face. Brenna tells her to come on and do it, essentially. And I think Bernice would have whooped Maurice's ass if they ever got physical, to be honest. And Maurice complains about Olivia saving Mariah over her, where she was worried about this and wants to watch the season in regret. Horacio is crying to Nerys about their fate, and Jay tries to speak to them, where he shows Nerys' list where this was not his doing at all, though he feels like shit because he wanted to protect her, despite her not protecting him. Olivia tries to make her case to Karen, and she speaks to Nerys as she regrets her move, and Nerys tells her that she spoke to her brother who told her not to trust Olivia. Olivia is shocked since she unknowingly fell into the trap. At the exile, only one person will survive, as essentially too many people made it to the endgame portion of the game and they only had a few more days left of filming. Where it's an obstacle course relating to specific skills, then they have to retrieve flags after completing it. The first one to complete it ends up winning and involves some sort of puzzle with making specific shape as well, and then stacking two cylinder stacks on a teeter-totter. And then there's a third part that I really don't care to remember, but Luis ends up beating Khaled and Horacio here. I do think Cannon was good TV this season, as he played from a position at the bottom for the first time in his reality TV career. He got into fights with people like Asaf, Berna, Jay, and a few others that I'm probably forgetting about, and he won several eliminations, some against hardcore legends of the game and show. He was trying to create an underdog alliance, and I do appreciate his efforts, though I do think that his smugness and entitlement that annoyed me about him on Big Brother is still present here, despite the good underdog edit he received here. I started seeing more of the flaws with Horacio on the season. He doesn't like to socialize with many people about the game or other stuff, which is why he ended up on the bottom, despite being in a good position in the beginning. And he really just didn't bring anything interesting to the show, where it was his allies who were gaming and fighting. It was becoming more clear that he just isn't for the show, despite the show pushing hard for him at this point in time. Maurice comes back to the house, and while everyone is happy that the other two are gone, she's keeping her cool to everyone despite not trusting anyone. She tells them that she will not tell them anything, and she tells all of them to fuck off. Olivia is crying and having a meltdown to Michelle, where she wants to make things with Olivia and Maurice, and though Olivia just made a reckless move in self defense. Mariah and Jay do celebrate the elimination results, with Emmanuel eventually joining in, where he hopes that he can repair things with Nerys. Olivia apologizes to Nerys about being in survival mode and making a choice in seconds, but she understands why Nerys is mad at her, though Nerys doesn't give her much here. Brenna talks about Michelle saving Olivia over her, and she is annoyed that Michelle does not have her as a number one, though Michelle still wants Brenna in the final. So she's losing trust in Michelle, and it's clear that Brenna lost trust in Michelle for a while now. Nari speaks to Michelle and Brenna about wanting an all-women's final, despite not standing Brenna the entire season, where if a woman wins the day tomorrow, they can all save one another with booting the men, which is a good idea in theory. The daily is drum roll, where they will spin 35 feet above the water, where the remaining 5 will have to go on a final round, and there will also be a losers round out of the people who dropped the first few, or the first few who dropped. So, apparently, a few people got seriously injured during this challenge as they fell into the water. So the bottom 5 have to play in another round. So because of this, Olivia, who's the first to drop in the main round, avoided getting purged here. Brenna wins the daily, and in the final round, Michelle drops first, causing her to get purged. Michelle played a masterful social/political game where she had so many connections to people throughout the season and called a lot of the shots, though it got overwhelming at a point. I do think they gave her way too many confessionals in the season, with none of them really being memorable, and it took away development from some of the finalists, where she broke the record for the most amount of confessionals in a season. I did appreciate the feistier and a bit more of a villain side of her, where she isn't kissing ass and begging for people's approval, but she wasn't as obnoxious about everything as Jay was. And I did feel bad how screwed over she was about the Callum situation. Everyone is freaking out about how Brenna is going to control this chain since Michelle was the one who can control and soothe Brenna, but that clearly isn't the case anymore with Michelle being gone. Olivia gives her pitch to Brenna and Colleen about how all of the women should go to the final, but Brenna knows that some of the women, mainly Olivia and Reese, gave her hell in the season, so she doesn't care like that. And of course, this is going to be screwed up. This is going to get screwed up. We have James and Mariah talking, and I don't care at all, but it seems like he knows that he's going in. Jay speaks to Olivia about how he has no power and Brenna is the one who controls things, though Olivia speaks to Jay about saving Nerys, though he is fine with saving Nerys at this point. And honestly, I do feel like the likes of Brenna and Colleen probably should have stuck with the plan since one of them most likely would have won the season had the guys been gone at this point. Colleen and Corey speak about how, while they love Michelle, her going gives them a chance in the final since they're used by Michelle and Jay and they can win now. But Jay being at the top will cause them to go in. And honestly, I'm tired of Corey kind of blaming everything on Michelle and Jay when he was very active in his decisions and a lot of the stuff he did wasn't even told to do by them. Essentially, Brenna reports all this to Jay and the all-girl final that Olivia and Reese were pitching essentially goes nowhere, and this sets him off as the girls' alliance is a direct threat to him, which fair, so he is fine with turning on Reese full turn now. Colleen spreads more about this alliance, and she says that 2 weeks ago, Nerys was campaigning to save Cannon over Jay. It says 2 weeks ago, but I don't know if it was really 2 rounds ago or 2 weeks ago in filming time. This completely changes his mind, where he does speak to Olivia and Nerys, who are expecting to be saved, as he confronts her about her forming an all-girl final and trying to send him an offer cannon, which is why he tells her that he's not saving her. Nerys wants to call Colleen in, as she has been true, and they're literally just cutting off one another, so this is immediately going to a bad place, where she mentions that she was protecting Cannon and Horacio and their alliance, and she leaves the room to yell at Colleen for being a fake-ass, dumb-ass, lying-ass bitch, and she was the one who started the pitch to begin with, i.e. Colleen started it. She does not give a fuck at this point, where he mentions that he's not picking her because game-wise she switched up, but they're friends, and she says that he has been fake to a lot of people in the season and that they are not friends anymore. And she also calls him out for being a snake. Emmanuel tries to pipe in, and she essentially shuts him up, where even Olivia called Jay out for crying for Nerys in the last chain of safety, but doing this now. And Nerys says Jay looks like a bitch now. Jay is still holding on to the Emmanuel and Ed vote against her, though he and Asaph had the chance to flip their votes when they were the ones who were more in danger. So really, he should just blame himself and Asaph for that. In the chain of safety, Brenna chooses Corey, who chooses Colleen, then Emmanuel, Jay, then Mariah, being safe, causing James, Nerys, and Olivia to go into exile. Nerys mentions that loyalty and integrity does not matter to Jay when TJ is confused and asking about why Jay did what he did when he cried for her over the last vote. And Nerys and Jay are going at it at this point, since she's not kissing his ass like everyone else, and he has his reasons for doing this, where things change a lot since the last vote. The exile is yet another one filled with running, but there are three puzzles, and then crawling under some sort of maze, then dive into the bucket water to. Sorry, you have to dive into bucket water to order the eliminated people in the order that they were builded, causing Reese to win over James and Olivia. She's happy about coming back, and the cast is not thrilled to see her, where Corey and Mariah were really the only ones to approach her, but she is glad to make the cast sweat. Mariah is crying over James, and Reese does cheer her up about this, which is nice. You can definitely see a lot of Olivia's insecurities this season with how she is perceived, how she performed last season, and her relationships this season. She did a lot of trash talking, and I do think she's been a bit more justified as we are a bit more distant from the season with Horacio and some of the other stuff that happened. But her flakiness and obsession with her image and self perception kind of just annoyed me. So I do think the hatred she got from the fan base was way too much. I don't have much to say about James in general. I did not like his romance with Mariah, and that's the only thing that kept him in the game, where he really did not offer anything to the show otherwise, so yeah, fine with him never coming back. Everyone is at the club where Tichi tells them that it is time for the final, though they have another day before it starts. They all read letters from their families, and Emmanuel remembers that he has a girlfriend now, where he cheated, though they really didn't show any of it. But we do learn a bit more about their families, which is kind of a shame that we didn't get this any time for most of the finalists all throughout the season before the final. Anyways, TJ tries to narrate all their journeys to make it seem like they are larger than life, but they barely showed any of it on the edits for many of them, so it kind of rings hollow. Only the top three get money, but the final is separated into the three phases of the game, where control involves them drinking the gross drink, and then they have to work together through 26 miles tied together, and then they have to make a bunch of shapes with ropes. The other two are, of course, chaos, which is in pairs or teams, and conquest, which is individual. They lose the first portion of the final because of Corey, so their prize money decreases for the final time, but an elimination will take place here. Corey kind of volunteers for elimination, though he would have been voted in anyways, and he gets to choose his opponent. And because he wants a woman winner, which I'm sure is just bullshit and him can't just fan servicing here, he chooses Jay to compete against. The elimination is where they have to build a puzzle tower while bouncing on one foot. This is a really lame elimination, but Corey does win over Jay. I do think this is an interesting turn for Jay as a character. He, with Michelle, held a lot of power this season, where they came in with a lot of power and connections with the pre-game alliance, and he made connections with people he never played with. I also do think him being with Aesop gave him a lot of confidence, where it kind of showed in his actions. Messy gameplay has always been Jay's MO throughout his reality TV career. And while I get why he decided to play like the vets that he hated, the entitlement he had and his tantrums at people not voting his way and not owning anything was very frustrating to watch. But he brought a lot of drama to the season, which is rare for the men on the season, and I hope he comes back, since I do think that a lot of the hatred that he got was just way too much. They are playing in chaos where they are playing in rotating pairs where they will be paired with all the others in 5 pairs, and this is based off who has the best timing overall. I am not keeping track of these pairs. Brianna's leg is strained at this point, and she is starting to have a breakdown, so her performance in the final is disappointing a lot of people, since they had high expectations for her. It's clear that Emmanuel is leading during this portion of the final, and he wins the control portion overall, where he does nominate Nerys. Nerys gets to choose her opponent, and she pulls the draw, which ends up being Mariah. They play in an elimination where they have to fit all 6 boxes into a tight contained box, where Nerys does beat Mariah. I was honestly kind of disappointed in Mariah competitively, since she was so strong physically and came off better last season. Her only content in the season was really about James, and while I did not care for her romance at all, I did not care for how Bananas and some of the vets reacted to it, since she was single the entire season. Her entitlement about protecting James got annoying, and I do think she's just a very chill, kind of boring, and not a reality TV person. But if she doesn't come back solely due to Bananas' alleged threats, that would suck. But I wouldn't feel either way if she does or doesn't come back overall. Anyways, the cast has to stay up all night, which is just ridiculous, where they have to remove the towels from their cage, gives them an advantage and some sleeping arrangements. They are now in the conquest portion of the final, where they have to go through 200 or 2,000 feet of water. I think it's 200 feet. I really don't care to fact check at this point. And then they complete 3 checkpoints once they arrive to the island, where they propel from the mountain south of Pasa and then drink, and as they drink, maybe not in that order, where they run to the finish line. There's a moment where Koi wants to quit at the heights portion, but he gets through it, but he does lose to the balance beam. Emmanuel ends up winning the season, Nerys gets second, Colleen gets third, Koi gets fourth, and Berna gets fifth. Brenna is someone who really got a lot of focus in the season, with her not fitting in and getting into her fair share of drama with people like Melissa, Nerys, and Kylan, which made her unique. She did win a lot of dailies for the women, but she did underperform in the final, which is disappointing since everyone was propping her up. I hope she comes back since drama follows her everywhere and she's just very unique, but I don't know if she will fit in with where they want the show to go into in the future, but we will have to wait and see. Corey was messy as hell this season, with the way he threw Melissa and Tula under the bus with their drama, and then his drama with Asaf in the beginning, while the latter was ranting about being his BFF and Corey just didn't give a fuck. After that, and almost being booted, he did turn his game around, improving his social relationships and won some challenges. It did annoy me that he wanted to be a badass and a victim at the same time, but it also kind of humanized him as well. As I am recording this, he's one of the few men who came back after the season, so I do see him having more longevity than most from this season. A part of me is shocked that Colleen came back for the season, since she wasn't a standout in any way last season. She was targeted quite a bit in the middle of the season, but she never really did anything and actively didn't flip, where it would have benefited for her to do so. She didn't get into any drama, do anything interesting strategically, and she wasn't a standout personality, though I don't need to see her back. And in the slim chance she does come back, it wouldn't really annoy me. But I also do think that English being her second language caused her to struggle in a lot of this area. Nerys on this season definitely reminded me of the one that I watched on Are You the One and X on the Beach too, where she was a very fiery personality and it caused for a lot of drama. Whether she was at the top of the food chain and getting into it with Miss Lissa about who can be the poo, or causing havoc when she threw her game away for her Hispanic buddies at the end game and eliminating 5 people, she was very rootable. But I don't really see her as a victim when it comes to the when it came to the game, since she was fine with targeting the same people over and over again in the beginning, as she really was safe for like 80% of the season, but the edit being behind her, they made her look like some righteous underdog. I do wish that she won the season though, instead of what we actually got. Emmanuel was boring as hell this season, even more so than he was on Spice Life and Allies, where he at least goosed around a bit more on the edit there. I also think a part of it was due to the fact that he was hiding his several affairs and hookups in the house. I guess he kissed up to Jay and Michelle despite not being the most important Alliance member, but he laid under the radar and they made the mistake in protecting him where he smoked everyone in the final. He didn't even get into any drama either, but I do remember some of his nasty commentary online. But I don't care about people who pop off online but not on the show. Good for him with winning the season, though I don't care to see him back at all. It is the reunion, and Reese is already bawling her eyes off before the reunion starts. They they invited the champions for some reason, and Asaf is already shading them, which is just ridiculous. Corey, Asaf, and Melissa are already chipping at one another before they even really get started, and Reese and Raven's friendship is discussed, where they were there for one another this season, despite starting off on a poor foot last season, where Harasi has been filming Exalted for 4 months, where Berna is also filming Survivor Turkey. Emmanuel's win is discussed, and Reese calls him out for winning due to cheating off Colleen, and Davin says that he won the season of Losers. Nori sees herself as the female champion, which people agree with. Corey did not want Jay to win since he had an easier ride, and Jay mentions that he had to help carry Corey to win, and even Michelle defends Corey. And I feel like Corey is just deflecting responsibility, to be honest, by putting it all on Jay and Michelle. But it's interesting how Michelle wasn't letting Jay come after Corey. Anyways, we have Corey walking on a balance beam, but he does do it. The US alliance, which doesn't seem like a real alliance, is discussed, and while it fell apart, Raven calls out Jay for not having an opinion about anything since he doesn't get why people are mad at him, and he blames the people not being in his main alliance as to why they're mad at him. Laurel calls out Michelle for her gameplay not working over and over again and how she needs to change it. Corey defends Michelle because she only went home due to the purge, which is fair, and everyone who went to the end worked with her. Mariah says that the alliance really wasn't real, and Raven thought that it was weird that Callum was choosing over her, and she felt off about that. Laurel and Callum were arguing due to his sleazeball ways, and I forgot they were on X on the peak together, so Laurel does know Callum and witnessed his fuckboy antics in person. Asaph is called out for his alliance not making moves, though I don't really get this critique since his alliance was in power the entire season, so why would they need to make big moves when they were the big move? Anyways, Raven said that if people knew he was Jay's number one, people would have trusted him even more, so they all kind of agree that Asaph and Jay hiding their relationship really didn't add too much, and if anything, it caused him to get in trouble, which is why Raven and Corey nominated him that one round. Somehow this leads back to Melissa and Asaph arguing somehow because he felt like she and Tula didn't vote how he wanted to during this Kieran vote. Melissa doesn't care what he has to say, and Corey ends up actually defending Asaph, calling out her social media antics. And I guess this is a nice development between the two men's friendship. Though the segment wasn't even about that. This somehow leads to Cara Maria and Trey talking about War of the Worlds 2, and I don't give a fuck. It's not their season. Olivia calls out Asaph for being the thirstiest on social media due to the game, which is fair, and Melissa and Tula are annoying as hell this reunion with their princess outfits, their crown, and just their overall attitude. So, Tula talks about coming out when it comes to her infatuation with women, where she wanted to talk about her experience with a woman, and she didn't tell her father when she was a teen. Sorry, she did tell her father when she was a teen that she liked women, and her family found out while watching the show, where her niece did message her giving her support, which was nice. Melissa talked about Corey not being supportive since he targeted Tula, despite them both being LGBT, and Corey mentions that it was genuine, but he didn't want to cross a boundary by speaking to her directly after the game, and he mentions that the personal is separate from the game, so while he supported her personally, game-wise he wanted her out, which I think makes sense. They're arguing with one another, and Michelle does defend Corey yet again, where he is all about gay representation. He has apologized to them, since the way he did it was cruel, but he's not going to continue to apologize to them, which leads to them to argue, since he doesn't see why they're mad at him over and over and over again. They all stand up, and Melissa yells, "Skip women!" But they continue yelling at men, so I don't know why you're yelling at men, expecting them to not yell back. That's not how this works. And he says he's not going to sit around and let himself be poked at. This is the end of that, and he says that they were never friends. It will be interesting to see what happens on All Stars Rivals with the three of them. Norice's relationship with Horacio is discussed, and he does join virtually for a bit, since she hasn't seen him in a while where both of them are emotional. Olivia mentions that she didn't think that they were compatible since they had many conversations, and Norice is snappy because Olivia was not happy for them, and she was the biggest hater. Olivia gave her opinion, and Norice was always cutting her off since Olivia was being too negative. Michelle defends Olivia, and Norice is getting snappy. Horacio says that he is fine with Laurel despite them not going anywhere. And it's crazy watching this now where Norice and Laurel have argued over the several months over Horacio to the point where I think Horacio even unfollowed and blocked Laurel on social media. And he even made a statement about it, which says a lot. Olivia and Horacio not being rated eyes anymore is discussed, and she mentions that he didn't tell her that he was during the show 4 days before filming, and he originally said no, but changed his mind last minute, where he wanted to surprise people. She was offended that he did not vote in Jessica, where she was coming for Olivia specifically, which the entire house knew about, and claimed that he didn't say hi to her, but they are fine now. Olivia and Reese's faltering friendship is discussed, and she says that they were Melissa and Tula with how close they were, where Olivia cries about there being a shift like 3 weeks until there was 3 weeks left in filming, and she felt very alone in the season. Nerys cut her off yet again, where she mentioned that she and Horacio tried hard with communicating with her, but she really ignored what her brother told her about Olivia. Anissa is the one who told her brother about this. Anissa is so damn messy. And Tori mentions that she did hear about this until later, but Anissa did not intend to ruin anything going on. So, of course, Tori's defending Anissa. Olivia mentioned that Olivia messaged her right before the season, rooting for her and congratulating her, so she's really confused about all this. Nerys says that if she didn't want to be her friend, Olivia should have just told her. Corey hopes that Olivia is given some grace, and Horacio is just not getting involved, and I really don't blame him. Nerys says that she forgives her, but they will never be friends again, though we know that this will change in a few months, and they became close again on 40 and afterwards, and I'm glad for it, because the situation really wasn't that serious. Emmanuel is called out for hooking up with 4 women throughout the season, and Asaph Shade at the vet is called out, and Devin makes fun of his 0-2 elimination record. And the vets, Dora and Nora, essentially tell him to shut up, and he's corny. Melissa, of course, calls Corey desperate, and Mariah says Colleen played a desperate game. Michelle randomly snaps at Colleen for trying to protect her, and Colleen has some misunderstanding over calling Michelle desperate. Asaph stabbing Melissa in the back is discussed, and he says that they would tell one another that if they are targeted, that they would give each other a heads up, and she thinks that he was faking their parenthood bond. He says that's not the case, and she calls him delusional for claiming that he targeted her first. Something about not voting for CRN when he wanted them to. And it seems like Melissa is just not separating personal from game yet again, but what Asaph did was definitely grimy. Raymond decides to step in for a woman for once, which he never did for Tiffany and Taylor when they were getting dragged on social media and in real life, stating that Asaph thought that he was talking about his mother and Asaph didn't do shit, though I'm pretty sure Colin wouldn't have done shit either, so moot point. Asaph tells him to shut the fuck up, Colin tells him to shut the fuck up, and they're both standing up like they're gonna do something when we all know that neither is going to swing, and they end it with a to be continued. So we continue with the Asaph and Kylan fight where they're both standing up like they're gonna do something. Jay decides to stand up like he's ready to make it a 2-for-1 situation if need be, which I guess defend your friend, but I'm not here for that. Michelle essentially pulls him aside to tell him to sit his ass down, and of course nothing happens, which duh. Melissa thinks that Asaph used her child in the game. Asaph calls Kylan a bitch. Jay looks like, yeah, I already said Jay looks like he's ready to square up. And Kylan does apologize to Asaph's wife, where Asaph said that Kylan did apologize to his wife, and he mentions that on the TV, Kylan says that Asaph said that his wife would be disappointed for making the move. Melissa calls him a pussy, and Asaph is tired of everyone coming at him on social media. He is mad about some sort of comments Darrell made. I don't really remember the context. And Darrell calls him soft, tired, and Courtney, and he needs to just relax. Zara calls out James for not messaging her in 6 months, where he was embarrassed about the move that caused her to go home since he regretted it. Of course, they are fine as we move back into the Corey, Tula, and Melissa mess. I thought we already did this in part 1, or maybe they just filmed both parts at once, but they're showing it out of sequence. Corey mentions that he wasn't using them the entire game, but was trying to get into the majority alliance, and Michelle, even Jay, defend him here, where no one trusted Corey, so he was trying to get back with his alliance. They block one another on social media, and they end up apologizing. We will see how this goes on All Stars 5 with the three of them. Brenna feels used by Colleen throughout the season, and she recorded a video where Colleen ghosted her after the season, and she isn't grateful for what Brenna did to her. Colleen is grateful for Brenna in the season, but she is too busy and they are not best friends, and she didn't see why Brenna was texting her all the time. Raven actually defends Brenna and mentioning that Brenna was defending Colleen all season, and she felt away because Brenna protecting Colleen was why she, i.e. Raven, was nominated so much. Colleen mentions that Raven is shady and has a poor social game, and Raven mentions that she doesn't trust people in general, and she was right about Colleen. So they're kind of arguing with one another, and people like Michelle and Mariah even mentioned that it seemed like Colleen was using Brenna. So it's clear that a lot of the women dislike Colleen, but there's never really any focus on it. Laurel mentions that Michelle kept on making the same mistakes and gives props to Mariah and Raven for actually improving the games, and I do know she's good friends with them in real life, so this isn't surprising. Nerys and Jay's fallout is discussed, and she mentioned it started when she dated Horacio, since they wanted her to choose a side, and Michelle says that Nerys did choose a side. Nerys tells her to politely shut the fuck up. Marie says that Khalid and Hirasi was always in her alliance when she discussed it with people, and Jay is now mad about the stalemate, and Marie said that she never voted for Jay or Asaf, which she's correct on. Nerys is crying, and Colleen mentions that she did not manipulate it, but Nerys Byrne voted. Nerys rants about how Jay knew her for 5 years, and Jay mentions that they really hung out during those 5 years, and she said that Jay said to her that Colleen and Bernard were liars, so why would he believe people that he himself said were liars? She's mad that her two best friends were the fakest ones watching it back. Jay said he called her to apologize, but she mentions that he did it a week ago because they knew that the reunion was happening. Not a good look for Jay. So Jay mentions that he essentially disappeared for a month so he could kind of just decompress from everything, which is why it took him so long. But she mentioned that it took him 6 months, but she doesn't care to be his friend at this point. Emmanuel and Jay are called out for being the biggest flirt in the season, despite the both of them having girlfriends. And Callum mentions that he was seeing someone for 3 weeks, where Michelle says that she should have been given a choice, and she was led astray, where she wanted to go to Manchester to see him after she was eliminated. Michelle did not know that he had a girlfriend until watching episode 1. Yikes! And he apparently apologized to her off camera, but she wants an on camera apology. She tells him to not love bomb someone and then leave them at their most vulnerable, but she's over the situation. Kylan and Melissa's relationship is discussed where they kissed at the hotel before the season started. He did it because he was seeing someone supposedly, and this kind of just affirmed how full of shit Kylan was with the whole situation. Jay and Olivia kissing on the bus is added by a bunch of the women here, and he's getting very defensive and angry. Where Nerys mentions that he and Olivia kissed because he thought that it wouldn't be shown, since I think it's either in like, the back of the bus or something like that. Olivia did not want to say anything about it, and Jay mentions that his personal life is his personal life. He's not going to address it. Nothing happened, and he said that the one time he got drunk, Asaph took him to bed, so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Honestly, Jay looks guilty, but it's neither here nor there. Mariah talks about the situation with Johnny, and she enjoyed her time with James, but she would have arguments with Bananas, where she mentions that when he did another show, he did not contact her whatsoever, and he did have a showmance there, though he told her otherwise. They haven't spoken since, and she says that Bananas hates her, and her family was the one who told her that he had a showmance, and she saw clips on social media and stuff like that. Tori mentions that the information came out right before she did her mercenary elimination, but she knew that he was hurt about it. Mariah mentioned that her mother and sister told her that he told them that he was going to be on the season, and the other vets mentioned that he was coming, but this and an ankle injury stopped it. Emmanuel ended up doing some dance that put Polly's War of the World 2 reunion dance to shame, and he was supposed to break up with his girlfriend before the season happened. They aired Brenna and Emmanuel hooking up when the cameras were not there, and he tried to deny it in the confessionals. Michelle thinks that they're going to show some sex tape or whatever of them, where she takes off her mic and she's walking off, where she says that there's no way that they're watching it. But she's told that nothing's going to be shown, and she sits back down as it's just a green screen. Tula and Melissa's friendship is discussed through the season, and Emmanuel talks about how Tula and Melissa created all a drama and were lying in the house, and Raven also mentioned that they knew that they were pissing a lot of people off. Melissa apologizes to Raven for throwing the drink at her, and Raven does accept it, since they are cool outside of the game. But in the game is another thing. Though I do remember them shading one another a lot on social media, and if I'm remembering my timeline correctly, I think it was after the reunion filmed. I am ignoring the Tori and Cara Maria stuff since it just seemed fake to me and they're not on the season as players and they squash it immediately in the next season anyways. It talked about how Jessica was the reason why Devin chose Callum in the elimination, and Michelle explains that Jess told Devin that Callum was bullying her in the house, and Jessica and Devin were hooking up at the time. Tula and Melissa are still snipping about Jay's cheating due to some game, and they end on a purge/save game where none of the answers are really shocking, so I'm not going to recap it. So, the fact that this review is over 2 hours long, which I couldn't say for the last few seasons, shows that there's some investment that I have in the season that I just didn't have for some of its immediate predecessors, so it's not going to be too low. But at the same time, the casting really isn't the strongest, so I guess for what they were going for, it could have been worse. And I do think that despite the cast not being the best, I do think they brought a lot of drama, which was missing in the last few seasons. But the format's just really, really, really bad, and it definitely holds the season back, in my opinion. The gameplay really wasn't the most interesting due to the big alliance, though there was kind of some brackets and subsections that ended up happening here. And the fact that I did this a year after the season came out, where we are somewhat distant from it to the point where we can kind of see certain elements that didn't carry on post the season, but there's still room for elements of the season to continue into the future with All Stars 5 and whatever comes of season 41, All Star 6, season 42, so on and so forth. So we still have some time to see or to get the fully dimensional picture of how the season will age and what will carry over from the season and what won't carry from the season. At the end of the day, it's definitely not a good season, but I don't think it's one of the worst of the worst. And I don't care about seasons that having mostly newbies and seasons without a lot of the main vets, since a lot of the main vets, especially at this point, were tired as hell. It's definitely interesting to go into Battle of the Eras right after this, since as I'm recording this, the last episode of the reunion has not aired yet. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'm grateful that I am ending the journey of the flagship show, though I am definitely going to review All Stars, with All Stars 5 airing in a bit less than 2 weeks. So I'll do the first 4 seasons right after I do Battle of the Eras, and Battle of the Eras should be out sometime next week. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!